Eswatini, Honorable Isaac Magagula. Your staff should be able to assist you to rename yourself so that we are able to identify you. So staff who are on board, please assist the honorable members to indicate the countries just before their names so that we are able to identify them.
Hello, Mrs. Kurasha.
Yes.
And everybody else. So, what the challenge now? Can you be able to identify me? I'm Malcolm Hardy from Lesotho.
Honorable Mohale, good morning.
Good morning to you, sir.
Colleagues from ICT will be able to assist you with the renaming. It's 10 o'clock. We need to commence the meeting. I still request that honorable members, please prefix your name with the country. We will also request that unless you have the floor, please keep your mic on mute. Aisali, are there any further housekeeping announcements? It's 2 past and we want to start.
Kurasha, hello?
Yes, Madam
Hello?
SG, good morning.
Yes, may I kindly request that in view of the paucity of time, you establish the protocol and we don't repeat ourselves to establish the protocol. We can only recognize maybe the guest of honor and the honorable speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam SG. That is duly noted.
Thank you, Mr. Kurasha. I think we are good to go from your end, except I think through you to just say that the members, should they want to contribute through the chat box, whether it's a question, whether it's a contribution, they can feel free to do so. When it's plenary time, we will open for the other members to engage with the process. But for now, let's get started. Over to you.
Thank you, Sally. I want to proceed and establish the protocol as directed by the Secretary General. Good morning, honorable members and distinguished participants. Allow me to establish protocol. I wish to recognize the Honorable Speaker of the Parliament of Zimbabwe, Honorable Advocate Jacob Francis Milimo Mdenda, Chairperson of the Regional Parliamentary Model Laws Oversight Committee, Honorable Mwana Hamisi Mungunda, the chairpersons of the chairperson of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus, Honorable Senator Linda Numalo, AU Commissioner Janet Ramatelli, Sala Nji, Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women. Allow me to recognize Excellence Boemo Sekoma, the Secretary General of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, members of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus, the honorable members of the SADC PF member parliaments who are serving on various national parliamentary committees responsible for gender equality, information, communication, technology, and gender-based violence, honorable members of the youth caucuses in the SADC national parliaments, the Speaker of the Southern Africa Youth Parliament, Honorable Patience Mnyenyembe, representatives of the SADC Youth, Southern Africa Youth Parliament, Standing Committee on Education, Science and Technology, and on Disability Rights, Gender and Young Women Development, representatives of our partners, namely Equality Now, Southern Africa Youth Forum, SIOF, the Alliance for Universal Digital Rights, staff of the SADC Parliamentary Forum and SADC National Parliaments, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to welcome you to this morning's webinar, and my director of ceremony is Sally Nuve from Equality Now, and my name is Shaunen Krasha from the SADC Parliamentary Forum. I'm the director, parliamentary business and programs. Sally, I wish to give you a moment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kurasha, and allow me all to write on all protocol observed. And to get us officially started, I'm honored to invite our first speaker for the introductory remarks. Madam Secretary General, we welcome you to open the webinar for us. Over to you, Your Excellency.
I would just recognize the Right Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly of the Parliament of Zimbabwe, Honorable Advocate Jacob Francis Nzwida-Milimo Modenda, and our keynote addressee, including all guests who have graced this particular occasion. Undeniably, all of you in attendance must be of the convinced view that gender-based facilitated technology is a significant societal problem that must be addressed. I believe that we are going to build on this common ground for the advancement of gender equality and the protection of the SADC citizens. Further, I would like to indicate that as I put things into the right perspective, the SADC model law on gender-based violence is a natural outcome emanating from some of these key areas that we'll be talking about today, including the SADC Parliamentary Forum Strategic Plan, which enshrines the need for the SADC region to achieve gender equality and at the same time adopt a culture of respect for human rights, which includes the right to physical integrity, among others. For this reason, I would like to...
There's too much light.
For this reason, I would like to underscore the fact that digital spaces have revolutionized how we connect and learn, how we organize and engage with each other. Now, putting a focus on women and girls, we are of the view that the internet has opened unprecedented avenues for expression and economic independence. However, at the same time, connectivity has become a dangerous double-edged sword. As technology evolves rapidly, so do the methods abusers use to stalk, harass, exploit, and silence, issues which the SADC model law on gender-based violence have remedies for. And I would like to believe that those in attendance are joining the SADC Parliamentary Forum towards the domestication of this SADC model law on GBV. We'll agree that whether it manifests as image-based sexual abuse, cyberbullying, doxing, or gender disinformation, it is not merely a virtual problem. The psychological, economic, and physical harms flowing from online abuse spill directly into the offline world, and violence online is still violence. Let me end by congratulating our weather of friends who have joined us today in this meeting and encourage them to continue to assist the SADC Parliamentary Forum domesticate provisions in the gender-based violence model law. I'm aware that we don't have much time, and at this juncture, allow me to kindly ask you to give a round of applause and thank the Right Honourable Speaker for sparing time to be with us today and give us remarks. You are well aware that there will be no other to have chosen to make remarks in this morning's meeting in view of the fact that when the Plenary Assembly set to adopt the gender-based violence model law, the Honourable Speaker was presiding over the Plenary Assembly. It is for this reason that we acknowledge that he has come so far and that he has indeed assisted us as also the chair of the legal subcommittee to look at forward-looking strategies of how we can have shared commitment and confront this particular ill today. Honourable Speaker, it is with these few words that I thank you and participants here today for your presence, and I'm grateful once again that you could join us today. Thank you.
Okay.
It's better now, yes. If you can see, that's fine.
Thank you, Madam SG, and for those remarks and setting the tone for our meeting, and more importantly, for introducing our keynote addressee and laying the context in terms of his leadership role around the normative framework that governs the fight against gender-based violence, principally the SADC model law on gender-based violence. And indeed, as indicated by Madam SG, it is our distinguished pleasure to request the Honourable Speaker to deliver his keynote address. Over to you, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Kurasho. Madam Secretary General of SADC PF, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to join you today and to deliver the opening statement at this crucial event, convened jointly by the SADC Parliamentary Forum, Equality Now, the Southern African Youth Forum, and the Alliance for Universal Digital Rights. That institution of such eminence and complementary mandate should converge upon a single purpose in itself, a measure of agency that attends the matter before us. Honorable members, distinguished participants, gender-based violence ranks among the most enduring affronts to human dignity that civilization has ever countenanced. For instance, the World Health Organization estimates that some 840 million women and girls have endured physical or sexual violence at the hands of an intimate partner or a non-partner at least once in their lifetime. In 2023 alone, some 85,000 women and girls were killed worldwide, and 60% of them perished at the hands of an intimate partner or a member of their own family. This ancient scourge has acquired a new and insidious digital frontier that recognizes neither borders nor the sanctity of privacy. That is why the United Nations Secretary General, in his report on the intensification of efforts to eliminate all forms of violence against women and girls, technology-facilitated violence against women and girls, cautioned that, and I quote, rapid technological change continues to create new risks with regard to violence against women and girls, unquote. The report recalls that such violence is increasingly experienced across the online and offline continuum as perpetrators deploy an ever-expanding arsenal of digital tools and platforms to inflict hate speech, harassment, and abuse. The ascendancy of generative artificial intelligence has aggravated the problem by entrenching patriarchal norms and facilitating the proliferation of image-based abuse. The report further reminds us that while all women and girls are at risk, those in rural communities are especially vulnerable due to limited digital literacy. Honorable members, distinguished participants, nowhere is this crisis more acute than on the African continent. In 2023 alone, an estimated 21,700 women and girls were killed by an intimate partner or a family member. Across the sub-Saharan Africa, 1 in every 3 women aged 15 to 49 has experienced intimate partner violence in her lifetime, and 1 in 5 within a single year. Left unchecked, therefore, this scourge will frustrate the Sustainable Development Goals and betray the aspirations of the African Union's Agenda 2063. Within the Southern Africa Development Community, 1 in every 3 women aged 15 to 49 and 1 in every 4 young women aged 15 to 24 have experienced intimate partner violence. Despite the strides the region has made in policy and advocacy, gender-based violence remains one of the most pervasive human rights violations, and the relentless rise of digital platforms has only served to multiply incidents of online harassment, cyberbullying, and stalking. SADC member states are therefore called upon to marshal the full instruments of statecraft to uproot this evil and to secure for all citizens the threefold birthright of safety, justice, and dignity. However, despite the conventions that have been ratified, protocols that have been signed, and modern laws that have been painstakingly crafted, including the Beijing Platform for Action, the Maputo Protocol, the SADC Protocol on Gender and Development, and our own national statutes, women still hanker for equality and humane treatment across the whole ecosystem of human endeavor. That is why the dissonance between the normative frameworks and the lived reality of women remains the most urgent unfinished business of our generation. It is to this deficit that your legislative stewardship must now be directed. honorable members, distinguished participants, in confronting this scourge, parliamentarians must also draw upon the inexhaustible resource of moral courage. In this regard, you would do well to draw inspiration from Maya Angelou, whose celebrated memoir, and I quote, "I know why the caged bird sings," and her iconic poem, "Still I Rise," laid bare her own experience of sexual abuse and trauma by the boyfriend of her mother. In doing so, she lent a voice to multitudes of women who had been condemned to silence. From that hard-won wisdom, she bequeathed an imperishable truth, and that truth is, you may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them, unquote. Yet the courage of the survivor demands a commensurate resolve in the legislature. Angelou broke the silence with her pen. You, as parliamentarians, must shatter it with the force of law. It is precisely in this spirit that the SADC Parliamentary Forum has created the SADC Modern Law on Gender-Based Violence to serve as the gold standard and normative compass that anchors the legislative efforts of member states in the struggle against this scourge. The modern law is unequivocal in its scope, proscribing every form of gender-based violence without exception and defining it in deliberately captious terms, so that once the instrument is accepted and adopted, its protections may extend as widely as the harm it is designed to eradicate. Read in that generous spirit and in fidelity to the definition adopted by the United Nations, its provisions embrace every manifestation of gender-based violence and extend their reach to all who suffer it and all who perpetrate it. Furthermore, the modern law translates this principle into praxis. For it enjoins the ministers responsible for the criminal justice system to develop sentencing policies and penalties commensurate with the necessity of eliminating all forms of gender-based violence. Honorable members, distinguished participants, the forum is confident that once domesticated, the SADC modern law on gender-based violence will yield a harmonized legislative environment uniquely capable of addressing the formidable and evolving challenges posed by technology-facilitated gender-based violence. This webinar is timely and it furnishes parliamentarians and staff with the policy insights and analytical tools needed to eradicate this menace. The webinar will also serve as a platform for capacity building and sustained knowledge exchange as part of the overall effort to domesticate the modern law on gender-based violence. Permit me to affirm once again that SADC Parliamentary Forum remains steadfast steadfastly committed to the cause of regional integration through legislative harmonization and to the unceasing pursuit of parliamentary excellency through activities such as this webinar. Our commitment is animated by the conviction that laws, when properly crafted and implemented with fidelity, are among the most powerful instruments of social transformation available to humankind. In the same breath, permit me to express our deepest gratitude to the partners who convened this webinar and whose foresight has culminated in the commissioning of the policy brief being disseminated today. It is my singular honor and privilege to declare this webinar officially open in the earnest hope that your deliberations will yield the legislative resolve required to consign technology-facilitated gender-based violence to the annals of history, where it belongs. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for the inspiring address, laying bare the startling statistics in terms of the victimhood of women at the hands of this double-edged sword, which has both good and harm. Spotlighting the critical role of parliamentarians in using the law as a tool for transformation, particularly leveraging the SADC model law on gender-based violence, which provides the golden standards that can inspire legislative action. And indeed, the law, when crafted carefully and implemented with commitment, with fidelity, to quote you, Honorable Speaker, stands as one of the most viable tools available for the emancipation of women who are disproportionately affected by tech-facilitated violence. Thank you very much for those remarks, Honorable Speaker. It does set the tone and inspire action as we move with the program. At this juncture, it is my pleasure to invite the Speaker of the Southern Africa Youth Parliament, Patience Mnyenyembe, to deliver her statement.
Thank you so much, Honorable Chairperson. Can you just confirm if I'm audible enough, please?
You are both audible and visible.
Thank you. Our guest of honor, our honored members and distinguished participants present, all protocols observed, good morning. On behalf of the Southern Africa Youth Parliament, I extend our warm greetings and sincere appreciation to all participants for joining this important webinar. We also acknowledge and commend the partnership among SADC PF, Equality Now, Alliance for Universal Digital Rights, and SIOF for convening this platform to disseminate a policy brief jointly developed by SADC PF on technology-facilitated gender-based violence, TFGPV. As youth parliamentarians, we recognize that tackling TFGPV requires more than awareness. It requires action, law reform, and implementation. And this webinar, therefore, offers a timely opportunity for policymakers and stakeholders to reflect on the nature of TFGPV within the Southern Africa context and on emerging trends. This webinar also gives us space to examine progress made so far and to identify practical pathways to accelerate the domestication and, of course, the implementation of the SADC model law on GBV across member states. Honorable members and distinguished participants, the SADC model law on GBV remains an important regional tool in guiding member states to develop comprehensive legal frameworks that respond effectively to gender-based violence, including forms that are enabled or amplified through technology. It is with this background that the SADC region has already established complementary frameworks, and that includes measures to address trafficking for sexual exploitation through the SADC protocol on gender and development, the SADC model law on GBV, and the SADC strategic plan of action on combating trafficking in persons. However, distinguished participants, we must be honest and clear. While most member states have enacted national anti-trafficking legislation aligned to the Palermo Protocol, many existing laws still do not sufficiently address the technological dimensions of trafficking for sexual exploitation and other TFGBV-related harms. And today, because of that, traffickers and offenders across the trafficking chain increasingly rely on the internet and digital tools to recruit, coerce, control, and profit from the exploitation of vulnerable women and girls. This is why our regional legal commitment must be translated into fit-for-purpose national responses that cover digital threats, online abuse, grooming, harassment, sexual exploitation, and related forms of coercion. Ladies and gentlemen, the SADC Youth Parliament views this moment as a turning point. We call for strengthening accountability mechanisms and legal responses that protect victims and survivors, deter perpetrators, and ensure that justice systems are equipped to respond to evidence and cases arising from digital and online environments. And as a youth parliament, through our standing committees, we will ensure follow-ups on the expected outcomes, including the following. Number one, we will ensure that there's an increased awareness of the TFGBV policy brief and the SADC model law on GBV. Number two, we will also ensure that we're able to support the caucus structures to table domestication motions in their respective national parliaments. We will also be engaging with member states and stakeholders to domesticate and implement relevant legal frameworks. We will also be enhancing collaboration among regional institutions, youth organizations, and of course, civil society. Last but not least, we will be identifying priority legal and policy reforms needed to address TFGBV. And finally, we will be supporting the adoption of a collective agenda to guide advocacy and implementation efforts from 2026 to 2030. Distinguished participants, you may also wish to know that us as young people, we are also committed to ensure that the voices of young people, especially girls and vulnerable groups, remain central in the policy and implementation processes. We urge, therefore, member states to create safe, enabling environments where survivors can report TFGBV without fear, and where perpetrators are held accountable, regardless of the platform used, and where prevention programs address the technological realities that young people face every day. Our guest of honor, honorable members here present, and ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we would like to sincerely thank our partners for this meaningful collaboration, and we encourage all stakeholders to move from discussions to measurable action, especially on the domestication and implementation of the TFGBV. And also let us ensure that the SADC model law on GBV becomes a living framework in our countries and not only a document on paper. I thank you so much for your attention. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Honorable Patience Manyenyembe. We really appreciate your leadership. And Honorable Speaker, Honorable Commissioner, Honorable SG, quite heartwarming that our demographics for Southern Africa has a huge population of young people. And when we see young people through your leadership, the SADC Youth Parliament taking seriously to ensure that there's alignment with the leadership and the inspiration from SADC PF and national parliaments, it gives us confidence that the region is aligned intergenerationally in harmony. So as we move to help us move with the program, to help us get to a point where we get the grounding, we are connected by air, we are connected by land, we are connected by water globally. So to help us, we are going to get to a process where we understand the global benchmarks to align with our thinking, which the global benchmarks are not just global to South, but we are part of the global ecosystem that have informed, that have participated, and that have been consulted to inform the international human rights laws, commitments, and standards that frame the digital governance framework. So to get us going, I'm going to invite Mrinalyn Dian, who is the manager from the Alliance for Universal Digital Rights, so that she can give us an overview of the global digital governance and rights framework. Thank you. Over to you, Mrinalyn.
Distinguished colleagues, partners, and policymakers, my name is Mrinalyn Dayal, and I'm the manager of the Alliance for Universal Digital Rights, known as AUDRI. It is an honor to speak to you today on behalf of AUDRI, which has been co-founded by Equality Now and Women Leading in AI. We find ourselves at a critical historical juncture. The digital revolution is reshaping human existence at a breakneck pace. Yet, as digital architecture expands, it is outpacing the legal frameworks designed to protect human rights. For too long, the digital world has been treated as a frontier beyond borders, largely self-regulated by corporate entities whose primary incentive is profit, not human protection. At AUDRI and Equality Now, our stance is clear. The digital environment, much like our physical environment, transcends national borders. Separate, siloed national laws are no longer enough. We cannot secure a fair digital future without unified, binding, global, and regional governance that is rooted in human rights. We at AUDRI champion a universal digital rights framework, again, one that is rooted in international human rights law and explicitly underpinned by an intersectional feminist anti-discrimination analysis. True digital governance means ensuring that every global citizen, regardless of who they are or where they are or how they connect, can enjoy fundamental non-negotiable rights such as the right to safety, freedom, and dignity. To understand where we are going, we must look at where the global policy direction is being set. At the global level, massive multi-stakeholder mechanisms are shifting from merely recognizing digital access to demanding stronger digital governance. Through our global advocacy work, we are trying to ensure that gender is recognized as a structural axis across these frameworks and mechanisms. The first I'll talk about is the Global Digital Compact, or the GDC, which is part of the UN Pact of the Future, and it establishes a global blueprint for open, free, and secure digital futures. Our work at AUDRI and with our civil society partners has been consistently to argue and advocate the fact that open, free, and secure is meaningless if online spaces remain hostile environments for women, girls, and other marginalized communities. Through our tireless advocacy with partners and coalitions, the GDC includes a standalone action line on gender equality. We're really proud of this, and we see this as a baseline to further push for gender equality and future actions. Another mechanism I'd like to talk about is the WSIS, which is the World Summit on the Information Society. For decades, WSIS has laid the foundational values of our global digital society, of equality, solidarity, and shared responsibility. But as we reflect on the evolution of WSIS, we must advance the conversation. Inclusion is no longer just about the number of women in STEM. True inclusion requires building political and regulatory conditions that give vulnerable populations actual autonomy and safety over how they connect. Last year, the WSIS conducted a 25-year review known as the WSIS Plus 25. And in that, they reaffirmed the need for gender mainstreaming across all their work or the WSIS action lines. And we at Audrey at the global level are now working to ensure that gender transformative indicators exist along all those action lines and that the action line facilitators are prioritizing these indicators so that we can track, measure, and ensure that gender equality is at the forefront of digital governance. The third global mechanism I would like to talk about is the global dialogue on artificial intelligence governance. It's happening for the first time this year in July. And as we are seeing an unprecedented global push to regulate AI, because algorithms are not neutral, they're fed on data that reflects historical bias, patriarchy, racism, and others. We're calling for strict safeguards and such as mandatory human rights impact assessments along the AI lifecycle, explicit moratoriums or bans on high-risk AI technology that target, criminalize, and surveil women and other marginalized groups. And we hope to see the Southern African countries also asking for the same. The African Union's digital transformation strategy explicitly visualizes a massive integrated digital economy. But as we push for rapid digitalization, we must look closely at who is being left behind and who is harmed. In the Southern African region, there is a compounding crisis where there is still steep digital divide between men and women in terms of access to technology. Yet, the women and girls who are online are disproportionately targeted by the most vicious forms of technology-facilitated gender-based violence, or TFGBV. TFGBV is not a minor inconvenience. It is systemic violation of human rights. Today, perpetrators, human traffickers, and organized exploitation chains utilize everyday digital tools, social media, encrypted messaging apps, and deepfake technologies to stalk, coerce, abuse, and profit from the exploitation of vulnerable women, girls, and other groups. Global commitments like the GDC mean nothing if they're not translated into localized, context-specific protections. The missing link here is regional architecture and laws through domestication, harmonization, and enforcement of the SADC model law on gender-based violence that defines GBV broadly enough to encompass online gender-based cybercrimes, technology-driven human trafficking, and sexual exploitation. However, a model law is merely a guide until it's codified international law. Right now, across the SADC region, there are several loopholes that exist, and laws fail to account for the multiple and quickly emerging, changing digital dimensions of these crimes. Perpetrators operate across borders with impunity, exploiting jurisdictional gray areas of the internet, while survivors are often left with no or very little access to justice or survivor-centered support services. We must leverage the SADC model law to rapidly reform national laws and build the capacity of parliamentarians. For example, webinars such as this are key to making that happen. To understand emerging technology trends, protect themselves from online political violence, and craft agile, enforceable legislation that holds technology companies strictly accountable for the harms facilitated on their platforms. My call to every SADC policymaker, parliamentarian, and stakeholder here today on this webinar is twofold. First, to accelerate the immediate domestication of the SADC model law on GBV, to mandate that national frameworks explicitly criminalize all forms of TFGBV, close cross-border jurisdictional loopholes, and demand algorithmic transparency and accountability from tech corporations operating within your borders. The second is to infuse all digital rights governance with an intersectional feminist approach to treat safety, freedom, and dignity online not as luxuries, but as fundamental human rights. Let us transition from global awareness to decisive regional action, where we must protect the most vulnerable in our digital ecosystem. And together we can build a safer, more equitable, and prosperous digital world for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the very incisive address, particularly emphasizing, and I like the last point, let's move from global awareness to decisive regional action. The key issues placed before us in terms of challenges is the reality that rapid digital developments are outpacing the regulatory framework, and that places the challenges equally on parliamentarians to ensure that the laws are up to date and that there is alignment with global human rights frameworks. The issue of the steep digital divide. The reality is that tech-facilitated violence is coming in a context where there was already gender-based violence, as we heard from the address by the official address by the speaker, where there is rising cases of gender-based violence, including intimate partner violence. So the tech-facilitated violence comes to exacerbate the situation. And therefore, it is important that we live to the challenges, including the transboundary dimensions that raise the issue of jurisdictional gray areas. And these matters are critical, particularly for parliamentarians. So thank you very much for that address. And indeed, your last point of moving from global awareness to concrete regional action, I think ties in very well with the fact that we're going to receive our next address from the commissioner, the African Union Commissioner, Honorable Janet Ramatolu Salanji, to give us a bit of a local context. We think global, but we must act local. And to act local, we need to look at the continental framework before we come down to the regional framework. So at this juncture, I have the pleasure of inviting the commissioner to deliver a keynote address.
Thank you very much, moderator, for giving me the floor. Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly of Zimbabwe, honorable parliamentarians, members of the Regional Parliamentary Caucus, the Secretary General of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, representatives of the SADC Youth Parliamentary Standing Committees, representatives of government, national human rights institutions, distinguished representatives of civil society organizations, development partners, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you. And I crave your indulgence to allow me to stand on the already existing protocols and to indicate that it is really a great honor to join you today in my capacity as a special rapporteur on the rights of women in Africa of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. From the onset, I wish to commend the SADC Parliamentary Forum, the SADC Youth Parliament, the Alliance for Universal Digital Rights, Equality Now, and all other partners for convening this important webinar to disseminate the policy brief on ending technology-facilitated gender-based violence through the domestication and implementation of the SADC model law on gender-based violence. The African Commission welcomes these initiatives. It demonstrates the critical role regional economic communities and parliamentary institutions play in translating continental human rights standards into effective national legislation, policies, and institutions. Today's discussion is therefore not simply about a regional legislative model. It is about advancing Africa's collective commitment to eliminate violence against women and girls in all its forms, including those increasingly perpetrated through digital technologies. As Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women in Africa, my mandate is to promote and protect the rights of women across the continent, monitor implementation of the Maputo Protocol, and undertake promotional missions, engage with state parties and other stakeholders, develop normative guidance, and encourage the domestication and implementation of regional and continental rights standards. So today's engagement is fully aligned with this mandate. As has been rightly observed by the Honorable Speaker, our discussion could not be more timely. Africa is undergoing an unprecedented digital transformation. Across our continent, digital technologies are reshaping economies, expanding access to education and healthcare, facilitating entrepreneurship, strengthening democratic participation, and opening new spaces for civic engagement. Yet alongside these opportunities, Digital technologies have also created new spaces within which long-standing patterns of discrimination and violence against women and girls are reproduced, amplified, and in some instances intensified. Technology-facilitated gender-based violence is now one of the most pressing human rights challenges confronting our continent, whether through online harassment, cyber stalking, image-based sexual abuse, cyberbullying, gender disinformation, doxing, or technology-enabled coercive control. Women and girls continue to face violence simply because they exercise their right to participate equally in society. As the African Commission has constantly affirmed, the digital environment cannot become a space where the protection guaranteed by the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and the Maputo Protocol cease to apply. Human rights are universal, indivisible, and technology neutral. The same rights that protect women offline must protect them online. Today's discussion therefore concerns much more than digital regulation. It concerns the fulfillment of Africa's human rights commitment. From the perspective of the African Commission, our response to technology-facilitated gender-based violence has evolved around three mutually reinforcing pillars: norm setting, knowledge generation, and accountability and implementation. It is through these pillars that the Commission seeks to ensure that Africa's digital future is firmly grounded in human dignity, equality, and justice. Now, looking at the first pillar, that is norm setting and then building Africa's human rights framework for digital age. The first pillar of the Commission contribution is the development of continental human rights standards. At the heart of this framework lies the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which guarantees every person's right to dignity, equality, life, integrity, privacy, participation, and access to justice. For women and girls, these guarantees are strengthened by the Maputo Protocol, which remains Africa's most comprehensive legally binding instrument on women's rights. Although adopted before the rapid expansion of today's digital technologies, the protocol was intentionally drafted in broad and forward-looking language. Article 4 obliges state parties to prevent, investigate, and punish all forms of violence against women. Its definition of violence encompasses acts that cause or are likely to cause physical, sexual, psychological, or economic harm. There can therefore be little doubt that technology-facilitated violence falls squarely within the scope of the protocol. The Commission has continued to elaborate this obligation through its interpretative work and soft law instrument. Of particular significance is the adoption of Resolution 522 on digital violence against women in Africa. Through this resolution, the Commission formally recognized digital violence against women as an emerging human rights concern, requiring comprehensive legislative, policy, and institutional responses. Resolution 522 calls upon state parties to criminalize and prevent digital violence, strengthen remedies for survivors, improve digital literacy, collect reliable data, engage technology companies, and ensure that women can participate safely in digital spaces. Importantly, it recognizes that technology-facilitated violence threatens not only individual dignity and security, but also women's political participation, freedom from expression, and equal enjoyment of all human rights. The Commission has strengthened implementation of protocol through instruments such as the Guidelines on Combating Sexual Violence and its Consequences, which reinforces principles of survivor-centered justice, effective investigation, reparations, and institutional accountability. Although developed in relation to sexual violence generally, these principles provide important guidance for addressing digital manifestation of sexual violence, including image-based abuse and online sexual exploitation. Most recently, the adoption of the African Union Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls further consolidates Africa's normative framework by expressly recognizing violence committed in cyberspace and through digital technologies. Taken together, this instrument demonstrates that Africa already possesses a robust normative framework capable of responding to emerging forms of violence. With regard to Pillar 2, that is knowledge generation, understanding the emerging digital harm. Norms alone are insufficient unless they are informed by evidence. The Commission's second commission to us therefore lies in knowledge generation, recognizing that GBV, especially technology-facilitated violence against women, continues to develop alongside rapidly changing technologies. The Commission adopted Resolution 591, mandating the preparation of a continental study on digital violence against women in Africa. The significance of this initiative cannot be understated. The study reflects the Commission's recognition that effective responses require more than assumptions, they require evidence. The study seeks to document the prevalence and forms of digital violence experienced by women across Africa, analyze legislative and policy responses, identify emerging trends associated with artificial intelligence and digital platforms, highlight good practices from member states, and formulate practical recommendations for governments, regional economic communities, national human rights institutions, technology companies, and civil society. Knowledge generation is in itself a form of protection. It enables the Commission to ensure that our standards remain responsive to technological development while giving states practical guidance for legislative reform. Importantly, the study also recognized that technology-facilitated violence is not merely an issue of cybercrime. It reflects structural inequalities rooted in discrimination, unequal power relations, and persistent gender stereotyping. Understanding these intersections is essential if our responses are to be effective and transformative. Finally, Pillar 3, that is accountability and implementation, from continental standards to national platform. The third pillar is implementation. The greatest challenge before is no longer identifying the problem, nor is it developing standards. The challenge is translating these standards into effective protection for women and girls. This is where Africa's human rights accountability architecture becomes indispensable. The African Commission supports implementation through our state reporting on Article 62 of the African Charter and Article 26 of the Maputo Protocol. Through our promotional missions, our communication procedures, our country engagement, collaboration with national human rights institutions, our cooperation with civil society organizations, and the work of the special mechanisms. These complementary mechanisms enable the Commission to monitor implementation, identify legislative gaps, promote peer learning, and encourage progressive compliance with continental standards. Implementation requires policy coherence. The African Union Digital Transformation Strategy 2020-2030 recognizes that Africa's digital future must be inclusive, secure, and rights-based. Similarly, the Continental Artificial Intelligence Strategy calls for the development and deployment of artificial intelligence in ways that are ethical, human-centered, and gender-responsive. This continental stance reinforces an important principle that digital innovation cannot come at the expense of human rights. Technology must serve people, not the other way around. Regional economic communities play an equally critical role. From this perspective, the SADC model law on gender-based violence represents an exemplary implementation tool. The model law translates continental human rights standards into practical legislative guidance for member states. Its recognition of online gender-based violence, cyber harassment, and related forms of abuse provides legislatures with concrete provisions to which states can fulfill their obligations on the African Charter, the Maputo Protocol, Resolutions 5222, and the African Union Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls. The African Commission therefore welcomes this initiative as an important demonstration of how regional institutions can operationalize continental commitments. Honorable parliamentarians, your role is indispensable. Parliamentarians serve as the bridge between international and regional commitments and the lived realities of citizens. Through your legislative, oversight, representative, and budgetary functions, you possess the authority to transport commitments into enforceable rights and hold governments accountable. The domestication of the SADC model law offers an opportunity to strengthen national legal frameworks while ensuring greater coherence with continental obligations of the African Charter, the Maputo Protocol, and the newly adopted AU Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls. You also play an important role in supporting states' reporting obligation on the African Charter and the Maputo Protocol before the African Commission. Strong domestic implementation not only strengthens protection for women and girls, but also enables states to demonstrate tangible progress in fulfilling their continental human rights commitment. As legislators, I encourage you to champion legal reform that explicitly recognize technology-facilitated violence, strengthen accountability mechanisms, ensure access to effective remedies, provide adequate resources for implementation, which is very important, and promote digital environments that are safe, inclusive, and respectful for human rights. In conclusion, distinguished ladies and gentlemen and their participants, technology-facilitated gender-based violence represents one of the defining human rights challenges of our time. The African Commission has responded by strengthening continental norms, generating evidence to inform policy, and reinforcing accountability to the African human rights system. The SADC model law is an important partner in this collective endeavor. It demonstrates how regional initiatives can bring continental standards closer to the lives of ordinary women and girls. The African Commission remains committed to advancing a continental human rights framework that is responsive to the realities of the digital age. Through Resolution 522 on digital violence against women, the ongoing continental study mandated by Resolution 591, the implementation of the Maputo Protocol, and the development of interpretative guidance and continued engagement with states and regional institutions. The Commission is working to ensure that no woman or girl is left unprotected as Africa undergoes digital transformation. The domestication of the SADC model should therefore be seen as part of the wider continental movement.
Hello?
Sorry?
You can proceed, Commissioner. I think it's someone who was not muted.
Sorry.
Apologies.
Sorry. Okay. The domestication of the SADC model law should therefore be seen as part of a wider continental movement, one that aligns the African Charter, the Protocol, the African Union Convention on Any Violence Against Women and Girls, the African Union Digital Transformation Strategy, the African Artificial Intelligence Strategy, and the work of the African Commission into a coherent and mutually reinforcing framework for protecting the rights of women and girls in the digital age. By working together across national, regional, and continental levels, we can ensure that Africa's digital future is not only innovative and prosperous, but also rights-based, inclusive, accountable, and safe for every woman and girl. Let us therefore continue working together. Continental institutions, regional economic communities, governments, parliamentarians, national human rights institutions, civil society, technology companies, and development partners to ensure that Africa's digital transformation advances equality rather than exclusion, empowerment rather than violence, and dignity rather than fear. If we succeed, we will not only make digital space safer, we will strengthen democracy, protect human rights, and realize the promise of the African Charter, Democratic Protocol for present and future generations of African women and girls. I thank you all for your kind attention, and I yield the floor, Mr. Moderator. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, muito obrigado. Thank you, Honorable Commissioner Janet Ramatule Salanje. I took up the challenge to make sure that I pronounce your name fully and well. Thank you for grounding us on the continental commitments, on the decisions that do exist, the resolutions that are already in play, and always for your inspirational leadership and commitment through the commission that you always hold space in solidarity and standing in to continue that our African legal frameworks are always connected at REX level, state and non-state actors. We thank you. To move now, we also now invite Mildred Nzau, Regional Program Analyst, to share the emerging global practices, because in our part of Ubuntu leadership, I am because you are, and we are grounded on existing examples of what's working in other parts of the world to inspire us and to give us confidence and also validate us, because we are not passive beings as a region, as SADC. We provide leadership. Our model laws through Her Excellency SG have really inspired the world to put in model laws, informed by the region. Now we move on to UN Women as our technical partner who have journeyed with us in so many ways. Over to you, Mildred, when you are ready, and kindly bear with our interpretation and ensure that the pace of delivery allows us to move together in French and Portuguese interpretation. Over to you, Mildred.
Thank you very much. The Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly of the Parliament of Zimbabwe, Honorable Chairperson of the Regional Parliamentary Model Laws Oversight Committee, Honorable Chairperson of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus, the SADC Peer Secretary General, Honorable Commissioner Janet, and all protocols are observed. Allow me to continue standing on the established protocols. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to share more around this topic that is very rapidly shifting and really very dynamic in terms of change. So technology facilitated gender-based violence in the context of the global legal reforms and the trends and what's emerging. Please move to the next slide, kindly. So from where we sit, we look at this as a digital democracy issue or a digital disparity issue. When women parliamentarians or even just women in general withdraw from public life because of these coordinated digital attacks, we find that women lose their democratic voice. And it's systemic and deliberate to ensure that women do not participate in political processes, in leadership decision-making processes. And so we find that TFGBV is not necessarily a technology problem. It is a democracy problem, it's a human rights problem, and it's also an electoral integrity problem. We find that a lot of political exclusion happens in the face of technology-facilitated gender-based violence in the form of coordinated digital attacks. And then when you come and look at the electoral integrity, even women who want to submit themselves for leadership positions, they are kept away from the space because of the scathing attacks that we see online. So we see a lot of young women losing out on the opportunity for standing up for election, a lot of established mature women staying away from the political space because of what the space online is looking like. In the civil society space, we also see a number of human rights defenders being silenced by the weaponization of deep fakes. Next slide, please. Of course, we cannot make these assertions without having the evidence. And for us, the numbers do tell us a story. A staggering 95% of women have experienced online aggression in terms of harassment, um, demeaning images online, specifically targeting women. That's a staggering 95% of women online. Coming down to women and peace globally, we look at 82% of them being subject to worldwide psychological violence, threats, and harassment online as well. Coming down again, we just go to the 60% who really experience digital violence as women politicians. 150 women MPs from 33 countries have said that they have experienced this online GBV, which is the highest rate ever recorded based on a study done by the Interparliamentary Union last year. 27 women in politics are 27 times more likely to face digital violence more than their male counterparts. And we realize that these are not anomalies. This is becoming the architecture of digital infrastructure of exclusion of women. When we move closer home, next slide, please. We see that in the continent, 58% of young women and girls have experienced that form of online harassment. And next slide, kindly. And 20% of sub-Saharan women in African countries have experienced that online violence, according to research by Alternate Realities and Alternate Internets. Next. Again, coming back to the prevalence of women parliamentarians, the data I shared just in the slides before, that was from last year. And we compare this with the data that we got in 2021 in terms of prevalence amongst women parliamentarians. Now we're talking about 82%, but in just a few years, short years ago, 4 years ago, this was at 46%. So we can see how exponentially the threat of digital violence is growing and doubling in figures in terms of prevalence and also risk. Next slide, kindly. So when you look at it in terms of a legal evolution, wanting to see how do we move from this cybercrime to a legal transformation. So when we talk about legislating around cybercrime and digital violence, we have moved now from a cybercrime era where the initial legislation and legal frameworks were focusing on protecting systems from digital intrusion. Can we protect our servers? Can we protect our information online? And then now we've moved again, moving into a human rights frame. How then do we protect people from digital abuse? And then now again shifting to see how do we ensure that the platforms we're using remain accountable? How do we ensure that there's mandatory takedowns, that there's civil penalties when people post content online that's misleading, that is demeaning? And then again, shifting now into the age of AI governance, where we're addressing issues such as deepfake criminalization, that's synthetic media transparency, when somebody has generated content using AI, that they can be transparent and say that this is AI generated. And then now again, still shifting again to that survivor justice, because we realize this is an area that really goes underreported, under-legislated, and we're not looking at the people who are becoming the victims of these attacks. We see that the internet does not forget. So how then do we shift our focus to ensure that we are also able to protect these people online? What are the civil remedies? How do we manage content removal? How do we work on non-disclosure orders? And so this is becoming the frame of how this is shifting. When we're looking at global trends, we've seen that there are already examples out there in terms of TFGBV legislation. In Australia in 2021, they were the first ones to actually have that comprehensive online safety act that was dedicated to e-safety, with a dedicated e-safety commissioner with regulatory authority on managing attacks that are taking place in the online space. In the European Union in 2024, again, we saw directives that codified cyber violence, deepfake, cyber stalking, misogynistic hate speech across 27 states in Europe. Again, we come closer still. Last year, the UK did criminalize explicit creation of explicit deepfakes with a penalty of up to 2 years, and that goes beyond mere sharing. So the fact that this has been created, that there is an actual penalty to the fact. In the US, they also legislated the Take It Down Act, which criminalizes non-consensual image sharing or abuse, and that is mandated platform removal within 48 hours. In Singapore, we've seen the Online Safety Commission have legislation that requires 24-hour takedown orders to compel disclosures of anonymous perpetrators. And so we've seen this legislation around technology facilitated violence happening globally. When we come closer home, next slide, please. Again, on the African continent, we've seen that response also starting to take shape. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights in 2022 adopted the landmark resolution on digital violence, specifically as a step towards safeguarding women's rights in the digital realm. Again, still this is not very much utilized across the continent, and so it is also up to us to ensure that we can tap into its potential for the efforts in combating technology-facilitated gender-based violence in Africa. Next slide. So when we're looking at that emerging threat ecosystem, when we talk about TFGBV, what are we really talking about? We've seen the creation of artificial intelligence deepfakes, with 96% of these being pornographic, 99% of these actually targeting women. Even on the continent, we have seen this target even women leaders. We're also talking about coordinated disinformation and these anti-feminist campaigns that are being weaponized. We've seen this happen in France. We've seen it happen in the US. We've seen it happen on the continent, especially in electoral context, where this coordinated disinformation is taking place. And then we've also seen the emergence of the algorithmic amplification, where platforms are rewarding engagement. So regardless of what this content might be, whether it's gendered, whether it's very skewed to be anti-feminist, very targeting to women, it doesn't matter. We've seen that the algorithm is rewarding this kind of sharing, and it becomes a business model also for the platforms, the social media platforms. And then we're also talking about that cross-border abuse. Recently, there was a case in Kenya where a Russian national was exposed, has exposed, the gaps in cybercrime, extradition, and data protection law in Kenya. And so again, this is just another example of what is happening in the region and the gaps that are needed to address these issues, especially from a legislative point of view. Again, when you're looking at Africa and SADC, this is also a defining legislative moment with the SADC model law. We have 57.2% internet penetration across SADC countries, but we also still have 230 million women who are not connected in sub-Saharan as well. We have legal instruments that are already existing for us to also have the backbone to legislate around TFGBV. We have the resolutions under SCHPR. We have the SADC model law that we're discussing today. We have the Global Digital Compact, and this is just revealing that this is not a gap in ambition. It's more of a gap in legislative action that we need to follow through as legislators. Next slide, please. So why is Parliament the democratic multiplier when it comes to TFGBV? Parliament, as legislators, you're mandated to make the laws. Only Parliament can pass these laws on GBV, on cybercrime, on data protection, and perform platform liability legislation. Again, Parliament also controls the budget. Every ICT ministry, has a vote on digital safety, forensics, survivor services, judicial training. All of these budgets come through Parliament for approval. Parliament also is able to shape the norms, the parliamentary commitments, the signals to perpetrators that platforms and survivors are what society values. So the value system can also be led through parliamentary action. And then finally, Parliament has that legislative oversight, that role to conduct oversight in our executives, to summon ministers, to demand enforcement reports from security services, regulators, and electoral bodies to ensure that even the legislation that we are adopting is being implemented at that ministry level. Next slide, please. So the 5 priority actions, I believe, that can now, push forward this action, even as we're looking at the model law. The first step, of course, being legislating the model law, the SADC model law, and by tabling the motion, within the time frame that is agreed upon to review this GBV and cybercrime legislation gaps. Again, a parliamentary inquiry on electoral integrity can also be a step that parliamentarians take to examine how electoral commissions, political parties, and law enforcement protect women in political spaces and, in general in the digital sphere. Parliament can call for that ministerial accountability. They can strengthen the cybercrime and GBV legislations that already exist. And also mandate that digital safety education and having that legislation that basically is gender responsive, digital literacy in schools, in tertiary curricula, in places of work, to ensure that that training, even for law enforcement, that they're able to identify and really plug the gaps that we see arising and emerging from TFGBV. Next slide, please. So, we are calling upon you as legislators because you are the ones who are holding the pen right now. Table that motion, initiate that inquiry, request those reports, strengthen the gaps in the legislative frameworks, and most importantly, ensure that there is funding for enforcement, for budgeting for justice, so that it's not just symbolism, but there's also justice for the survivors, and that we are able to close these digital gaps. Allow me to end my presentation there and just say thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mildred. Indeed, the parliamentarians on the platform holds the power, holds the pen, holds the platform for accountability, oversight, and also the people from their constituencies. So really, it's the power, the platform, the parliaments, the policies, the people, and the power for ensuring that there's oversight and accountability strengthened. Now we move to a landscape overview of Southern Africa to be shared by Honorable Ian Vambe from SIOF. Over to you, Ian. Confirming.
Thank
if
you, Sally.
okay. Thank you.
Confirm I'm audible enough.
Yes, you are both audible and visible. Over to you.
The opportunity and at the previous speakers. Thank you. Civil society partners and fellow advocates joining us in this meeting.
Kindly
right. On behalf of the Southern Africa Youth Forum, SIOF, I am honored to address this critical webinar dedicated to the dissemination of policy brief on ending technology-facilitated gender-based violence, TFGBV, within the frameworks of domesticating and implementing of the SADC model law on gender-based violence. Now, to further understand the scope and impact of TFGB, which we all know that it's not a new or something that we don't understand really, a new phenomenon, but rather a systematic extension of the patriarchal violence into digital spaces. So TFGBV encompasses broad spectrums, harms, such as online harassment, cyber stalking, consensual intimate image sharing, commonly called revenge pornography, doxing, digital financial image-based sexual abuse, hate speech, technology-enabled trafficking. These are some of the examples of what you're witnessing on a daily basis. The data is so alarming, as you've seen and heard from the Speaker of the Parliament of Zimbabwe, Advocate Mudenda, when he presented the numbers. They are alarming across the SADC region, and studies that we have seen showing survivor testimonies reviewing that between 30 and 70% of women who use internet experienced some form of online gender-based violence. And young women aged between 15 and 35 are disproportionately targeted. And the harm is not merely emotional, it also translates to physical danger, loss of livelihoods, and a forced withdrawal from our public lives. What makes TFGBV particularly insidious is its transboundary nature. A perpetratory country can target a survivor in another. Evidence is lost across jurisdiction, and platforms operating under foreign legal frameworks remain largely unaccountable to Southern African authorities. Without coordinated regional responses, survivors obviously are left without recourse, and the perpetrators will just go free without any legal action being taken upon what they would have done. Now, to move to talk about digital rights as human rights. As the Southern Africa Youth Forum, SAYOF, our position is quite clear that digital rights are human rights. The right to safety, privacy, freedom of expression, and freedom of violence does not end at the borders of, or does not know the cyberspace borders. Every woman, every girl, every person in the region has the right to participate fully and safely within this digital world and the global village we constantly talk about. The African Charter on Human and People's Rights, the Maputo Protocol, the SADC Gender Protocol, all enshrine that the right to a life of free from violence is what we need. And as we advance the domestication of the SADC model law on gender-based violence, it is imperative that these protections are explicitly extended to digital spaces and that our governments are actively implementing the provisions of this SADC model law. Now, to talk about the SADC model law as a regional imperative, we really look at how this SADC model on gender represents a landmark regional commitment, and it provides a comprehensive normative framework that member states adapt and adopt to address GBV in all its manifestations, including in digital environments. Now, the dissemination of policy briefing ending TFGBV is a critical step in the process that translates complex legal and technical provisions into actionable guidance for government, civil society, and communities. But again, dissemination alone is insufficient. We must ensure that this policy brief catalyzes concrete legislative reform at national level. And effective domestication requires member states to do a number of things, which I'm going to outline. Number one, to enact and strengthen national legislation that explicitly criminalizes TFGBV with survivor-centered provisions for reporting, for protection, and redress. This must be an established way to ensure that we address TFGBV. Number two, to establish accessible and confidential digital reporting mechanisms that minimize traumatization of survivors, because normally survivors of TFGBV conversations are also amplified and people picked it also online. Number three, to hold technology platforms accountable through regulatory framework that recognize timely removal of harmful content and cooperation with national investigations. So many times when these are eventually removed, the harm would have already been done. Number 4, governments and states will need to invest in the capacity of law enforcement, judiciary, social service provider, understand, document, and prosecute TFGBV. And lastly, integrate digital safety rights, literacy into national education curricula and community outreach programs to ensure that we catch them young in primary and secondary education. When we look at the young people, both as primary users of digital technology and most frequently with harm online, they are also our powerful agents of change. And the Southern Africa Youth Forum is committed to ensuring that voices that shape policies, laws, and platforms and govern their digital lives are key in also coming up with this legislation. We call on civic society across the region to use policy briefers and advocacy too, engage parliamentarians, to work with the traditional and religious leaders, to hold tech companies accountable, and to support survivors with dignity and courage. And we must, of course, have the communities of care, both online and offline, how we can integrate the two. Now, looking at SIOF's commitments to action and call to action, because we believe not just in proposing solutions, but also taking a commitment upon ourselves and see what we will do. So the Southern Africa Youth Forum, SIOF, reaffirms its commitment to this cause. We will continue to advocate for the full domestication of the SADC model law across all member states and will amplify survivor voices. We also engage governments, regional bodies, and international partners to resource mobilize and also the implementation of a TFGB policy brief. And we will build capacity of the young people, especially young women, to claim their digital rights. Today, we issue a clear call of action, given what we have just discussed, that to governments, may you prioritize the domestication of the SADC model law and engage comprehensive TFGBV legislation without any further delay and treat this as a matter of urgency. To regional bodies, we say resource and monitor the implementation of the commitment made under the SADC Gender Protocol. And to technology platforms, engage meaningfully with African governments and societies to develop a context-sensitive safety standards and effective content moderation. To donors, the development partners fund survivor-led organizations to ensure that they do get to carry their mandates without any limitations. To fellow young people, know your rights. It's quite important that you speak out, support survivors, and refuse to accept a digital future that replicates violence and inequality space for anyone. It reflects and replicates the power and the strength of our societies, but it can also be a space of solidarity, a space of healing, and a space that we can all use for greater good. The Southern Africa Youth Forum stands ready to walk this journey with every partner in this room. Let us leave this webinar not merely informed, but also activated. As we always say, that if policy lacks implementation, it simply becomes rhetoric. And again, allow me to say thank you so much for this opportunity from the Southern African Youth Forum. This is our submission. Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. We greatly appreciate the leadership that SIOF provides and also the technical support that SIOF continue to journey with the SADC Youth Parliament, different national member youth caucuses. In line with the notice that Honorable Her Excellency Secretary General of SADC PF, in invitation of national parliaments to this webinar, she had extended for national parliaments to make some presentations sharing their country reflections in terms of the legal and policy interventions that are existing, the emerging and legal trends and issues, and also just share an overview of what is happening in some of our member states so that we can link, learn, get inspired from each other, and also support each other and acknowledge our great progress that we are already doing in the region. To get us started on the country context overview, allow me to invite Honorable Deputy Speaker, Honorable Manyenyang from Botswana. Over to you, Honorable, when you are ready. Kindly share briefly around your Botswana country context.
Good morning. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Me. Thank you, Honorable.
Okay. The Right Honorable Speaker of Zimbabwe, Honorable Mudenda, Honorable MPs, Honorable Regional Committee of Women, all protocol observed. Our members, let me start by saying we have the national legal framework which defines and criminalizes the TFGBV. And we have the Cybercrime and Computer-Related Crimes Act of 2018. It criminalizes a number of TFGBV related to cyberspace, including, among others, cyber extortion, cyber harassment, cyber stalking, offensive electronic communication, pornographic or obscene material, revenge pornography, and unlawful disclosure by a service provider. Honourable members, when we go to other acts, we have Digital Service Act, which we passed in 2025, which compels public bodies to maintain the production and publication of data assets which are directly related to activities that protect the safety of human rights. This act also requires public bodies to engage the public on public data assets and encourage collaboration by assisting civic society and members of the public working to expand the use of public data assets. We also have Cybersecurity Act of 2025, of which we passed last year. And it establishes the bodies that will assist in providing cybersecurity in Botswana, including monitoring of cybersecurity threats and incidents, dissemination and sharing of critical information, such as early warning, alerts, announcement of security advisory. The bill further encourages public education and awareness of cybersecurity. This will go a long way to preventing cybercrime against women and girls, which is also to facilitate prompt investigation. We have Data Protection Act, honorable members, of 2024, which regulates protection of personal data, prohibits the authorized processing of sensitive personal data, and regulates processing of data for medical and health reasons. Honourable members, we are on the route of domesticating the model law on GBV. As we speak, the Minister of Youth and Gender is currently working with Attorney General to draft the gender-based violence bill. As we speak, the bill is at drafting stage. Honourable members, we are also having some specific protocols in our country that allow admission of digital evidence. We have Electronic Records Evidence Act of 2018, which provides the admissibility of electronic records in legal proceedings, authentication of electronic records, and admissibility in evidence of electronic records and original records. If you go further, you see that when you talk electronic records, we define it as data that is recorded or stored on any medium in or by a computer system or by other similar device that can be read or perceived by a person or a computer system or other similar device. And it includes a display, printout, or other output of the data. Question 4, honourable members, is talking institutional and cyber resilience. As we speak, Botswana doesn't have a specific purported cyber resilience framework. However, the government protects female politicians and citizens through broader national legislation, such as Cybersecurity Act, the Cyber Crime and Computer-Related Crimes Act, and the Data Protection Act. These legal and structural mechanisms act as safeguards against the digital harassment and cyber stalking that disproportionately affect women in public life. Also, furthermore, we have Botswana Police, which operates a special gender and child protection branch. It offers anonymous toll-free lines for cyber harassment and physical threats. Lastly, honorable members, I would like to talk about this one. As I'm saying, it is at the drafting stage. The Minister of Youth and Gender is currently working with Attorney General to draft the gender-based violence bill. The bill is still at drafting stage, but we are hoping the bill, among others, will be addressing the issue of TFGBV. It is also expected to be very comprehensive and address prevention, protection, response, prosecution, and rehabilitation in a coordinated and survivor-centered manner. I submit, Honorable Chair. Thank you.
Kaleboga Honorable Helen Manyengeng. I hope I have pronounced it well. Thank you, Botswana, for inspiring us with the great work that you are doing. Now we move all the way from Botswana. We are now flying to Tanzania in our SADC region. Allow me, honorable members, to invite Honorable Professor Joyce Ndalichako from Tanzania. Kindly be brief. We are trying to pass up with time. Over to you to share your presentation context from the Republic of Tanzania. Over to you, Honorable Helen.
Thank you very much. I'll speak on behalf of Professor Ndalichako. My name is Dr. Regina from Tanzania. I'm the member of the parliament. First of all, let me take this opportunity, Honorable Chairperson, to express my sincere appreciation for your insightful opening remarks. Your address has greatly enhanced our understanding of this growing challenge and has provided valuable guidance to support informed decision-making by members of parliament in our respective countries. Honorable Chairperson, it is my honor to represent the United Republic of Tanzania in this important discussion on strengthening our collective efforts to end technology-facilitated gender-based violence. It is important to understand that while digital technology has created enormous opportunities for economic growth, innovation, and social development, it has also introduced new forms of violence against women and girls. These include online harassment, cyberstalking, cyberbullying, online sexual exploitation, and the non-consensual sharing of intimate images. Honorable Chairperson, in Tanzania, we have made significant progress in addressing technology-facilitated gender-based violence through Cyber Crimes Act of 2015, the Personal Data Protection Act of 2022, and the National Plan of Action for the Prevention of Violence Against Women and Children, 2025-2029, which includes TFGBV as a priority area. These measures have strengthened the protection of citizens in the digital space. Honorable Chairperson, allow me at this point to commend Her Excellence President Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan for her continued commitment to advancing gender equality, women empowerment, and the digital transformation in Tanzania. Her leadership has created an enabling environment for strengthening legal reforms, expanding digital inclusion, and promoting the protection of women and girls both offline and online. Honorable Chairperson and distinguished participants, despite this progress, challenges remain, which including limited public awareness of digital rights and reporting of online abuse, difficulties in handling digital evidence, and the rapid evolution of technology. Distinguished participants, going forward, Tanzania remains committed to strengthening its legal and policy framework, building institutional capacity, promoting digital literacy, and enhancing collaboration with fellow SADC member states to create safer and more inclusive digital spaces. Honorable Chairperson, as parliamentarians, we have a shared responsibility to ensure that our laws keep pace with technological change so that technology becomes a tool for empowerment rather than a platform for violence against women and girls. Together, let us build a digital future that is safe, inclusive, and free from all forms of gender-based violence. Thank you very much for your attention.
Asanteni sana, Honorable Regina Malima. We greatly appreciate the Republic of Tanzania for sharing your journey and inspiring us to join in. Honorable members of parliament, continue fastening your seatbelts. We are now departing the Republic of Tanzania, and now we have begun our descent, and we are now landing in Namibia. Now allow me to invite Honorable Bush. I hope I have pronounced it well, so that she can take us through the overview from Namibia. Over to you, Honorable. Confirming if the Republic of Namibia is connected and ready to share the country context.
Good morning, we are connected, waiting for Honorable Bush.
Thank you so much. Let's remain seated and fastening our seatbelts. Namibia is ready for us to disembark and get in context of Namibia. Honorable Fetahu, are you ready? Can we hand over to Honorable Bush?
Yes, I'm here, but not ready. That responsibility have been assigned to her. Let me try to allocate her offline to quickly come back online.
Thank you. So now no worries. Thank you. So we proceed to Eswatini while we wait for Namibia to connect with us. Allow me, honorable members, to invite Honorable Futhi Ngamapalala, I hope I pronounced it well, who's the chairperson of Committee on Gender and Development in the House of Assembly from Eswatini. Honorable Futhi, are you ready to share the Eswatini context overview?
Yes, Program Director, I am very ready, and I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are audible and visible. We can see you. Thank you so much. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Program Director. Let me first by recognizing the Honorable Speaker of Zimbabwe, the Secretary General,
of the SADC PF, all honorable members present. It's still a very good morning in the beautiful kingdom of Eswatini. I am here to present the overview of the beautiful kingdom of Eswatini and what we have been doing or working on the gender-based violence and on the facilitation of technology. Honorable Program Director. I will begin by mentioning that technology has transformed our societies, but it has also transformed gender-based violence. Today, abuse can occur instantly, anonymously, and across borders, making it imperative that our laws evolve at the same pace as digital innovation. In this presentation, we'll provide an overview of Eswatini's current legal framework, highlights existing gaps, and outline Parliament's role in advancing the domestication of the SADC model law on gender-based violence to strengthening the country's response to technology-facilitated gender-based violence. We have key frameworks that are in place in the country that we are working on while we're still looking at advancing our technology-facilitated GBV. We have the Kingdom of the Country, which was enacted in 2005. We have the Sexual and Offences and Domestic Violence Act of 2018, the Computer Crime and Cybercrime Act of 2022, the Data Protection Act also of 2022, the National Gender Policy of 2010, the SADC Protocol on Gender and Development of 2008. And Eswatini recognizes that the digital transformation presents significant opportunities while creating new forms of violence against women and girls. The legislative baseline that we have, the current legal protection, Eswatini does not yet have a standalone law defining the technology-facilitated gender-based violence. However, the existing legislation addresses many related offenses, which is the Sexual Domestic and Violence Act of 2018, the Computer Crime and Cybercrime Act of 2022, and the Data Protection Act of 2022. Existing legal protection generally addresses cyber harassment, identified theft, sexual exploitation, psychological abuse, privacy violations, and the admissibility of electronic violence. And the gap that is currently there, current legislation does not comprehensively define or regulate the TFGBV. What are we having as emerging issues and challenges? The emerging forms of TFGBV include the online harassment of women leaders, cyberbullying, non-consensual sharing of intimate images, and online sexual exploitation. They also encompass digital stalking, AI-generated abuse, and deepfakes, and the use of online transforms to recruit victims for trafficking. And the key challenges include legislative gaps, limited digital forensic capacity, underreporting of technology-facilitated offenses, difficulties associated with cross-border investigations, low levels of digital literacy, and the rapid pace of technological change, which often outstrips existing legal and institutional frameworks. And the status of our domestication currently, and the current stage, initial parliamentary engagement. The progress includes participation in SADC PF, PAP, and CPA initiatives, women's parliamentary caucus engagements, seasonal committees on gender and development, parliamentary capacity building largely sponsored by SADC PF, and we're very grateful for that. And what are our next steps? We are looking to include conducting a legislative gap analysis, engaging with relevant parliamentary committees, consulting the government and key stakeholders, and progressively domesticating the SADC model law on gender-based violence. And digital evidence and institutional readiness. How ready are we as the kingdom? Eswatini Parliament has an institution. As an institution, has not yet established a cyber resilience framework to protect women's political participation. Worth noting, however, is that Eswatini increasingly recognizes electronic evidence in criminal proceedings, including WhatsApp messages, emails, SMS, social media content, and other digital records, strengthening across to justice, from justice to survivors of technology, facilitated gender-based violence. Parliament continues to advocate for and strengthen its ICT systems, cybersecurity, digital governance, and information security. However, institutional cyber resilience remains an evolving area, requiring dedicated policies and enhanced safeguards to protect women in public leadership from online abuse, harassment, and disinformation. And the opportunities that are there, Eswatini will leverage the SADC model law on gender-based violence to strengthen parliamentary oversight, modernize its legal frameworks, and promote survivor-centered justice that effectively responds to emerging forms of technology-facilitated gender-based violence. Regional cooperation strategic partnerships, public awareness campaigns, and digital literacy programs will strengthen institutional resilience, promote safer digital spaces, and accelerate progress towards ending TFGBV. Parliament's strategic plan provides for the development of an anti-harassment policy. This prevents a timely opportunity to broaden its scope to explicitly address TFGBV, ensuring members and parliamentary staff are protected from online harassment, abuse, and disinformation. And the priority reform that we have for 2026 to 2030 is our national commitment. The Parliament of the Kingdom of Eswatini stands ready to champion and advocate for the development of a comprehensive legal framework that explicitly addresses TFGBV, in line with the SADC model law on gender-based violence and international human rights standards. Priority reforms include inter alia establishing a statutory definition of TFGBV, regulating AI-enabled abuse, strengthening online child protection, improving digital evidence procedures, adopting survivor centers reporting mechanism, and enhancing cross-border cooperation. These aligns with the objectives of the SADC model law on GBV and the webinar's call for accelerated domestication. And our program director, I will conclude by saying the Parliament of the Kingdom of Eswatini reaffirms its commitment to advancing the domestication of the SADC model law on gender-based violence, strengthening oversight of digital governments, promoting survivor-centered legal reform, enhancing regional collaboration, and advocating for safe, inclusive, and secure digital spaces for women and girls. As technology continues to transform our societies, it must remain a force for empowerment, innovation, and democratic participation, never a platform for violence, discrimination, or exclusion. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you so much, Honorable Futi. I don't know if you use Siyabonga. We appreciate the commitment of Eswatini and the clear next step. Namibia, are we ready? Honorable Bush, is Honorable Bush online?
No, it's me online. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Honorable Vetaruche. I hope I have pronounced it well.
Yes, perfect.
Thank you. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, and all protocol observed. All honorable members, speakers, deputy speakers, our technocrats that are present right here. And I'm delighted to join this very important platform. And I also thank the previous speakers who did a very useful presentation. So on behalf of Namibia, of course, I'm a member of parliament of the 8th Namibian Parliament, and also a member of Standing Committee on Gender, Health and Social Services, Social Welfare. That's Parliamentary Standing Committees. My contribution or our contribution would be is implementation of the SADC model law on gender-based violence and the dissemination of the policy brief on adding technology-facilitated gender-based violence, TFGBV, in Namibia. Legal and policy intervention undertaken to address technology-facilitated gender-based violence. Namibia currently lacks specific laws addressing technology-facilitated gender-based violence or cyberbullying against women. However, some laws and instruments protect women's rights against all forms of abuse, such as Article 13 of the Namibian Constitution, Combating Domestic Violence Act of 2003, Electronic Transaction Act of 2009, Child Care and Protection Act of 2015, Communication Act of 2019, Combating Rape Amendment Act of 2022, Gender-Based Violence Guidebook of 2025, developed by the Civil Society Organization, and the National Cybersecurity Strategy and Awareness Rising Plan 2022 to 2027. So those are some of the legal instruments that are in place. Emerging legal and policy issues, development and trends. The emerging development and trends include the misogynistic abuse online against prominent women and girls, women holding and aspiring for political positions such as ministers and members of parliament experience online abuse, bullying and other violence. Sometimes we also call them perfume women. So that's how sometimes we bully them as male, just to suppress them a bit. So those are some of the bullying that we are making at women that want to excel in some of these platforms. Revenge porn and non-consensual image sharing and explicit or sexual photograph and videos on social media such as Facebook and WhatsApp group. Over the years, this behavior has become common in Namibia, with various and pictures circulating on social media featuring popular female personalities and girls. So key legal and policy gaps, challenges and constraints. There is no specific law to protect women from online abuse. There is no National Data Protection Authority in Namibia to prevent women information against online sharing and abuse. There are no specific laws that regulate the manner in which personal data may be stored or transmitted online. No specific punitive measures for online women abusers. So men always get away with murders. Opportunities, commitments, and proposed measures for strengthening legal and policy frameworks. Opportunities and proposed measures to end technology-facilitated gender-based violence includes the Cyber Crime Bill of 2026, Data Protection Bill of 2021, the Namibia Computer Incident Response Team under the Communication Regulation Authority of Namibia, CRAN. I so submit. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kandroth, for submitting on behalf of Namibia a demonstration of he for she. We need male allyship if we must overcome gender-based violence, including technology-facilitated GBV. The submission by Namibia concludes the 4 countries that have managed to submit in response to the request by the Secretary General. The appeal to honorable members is that...
Kurasha, I'm very
Yes, sir?
sorry, it's South Africa here. I've also been requested to do make an input. I don't know whether they have not submitted this parliament, but they have requested that I should also make an input on behalf of South Africa.
Please proceed, Vice President.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And let me also continue to stand on the established protocol that is already there. Good morning to everyone. It is indeed an honor for me to, on behalf of South Africa, submit our country's perspective on the growing challenge of technology-facilitated gender-based violence, commonly referred to as TFGBV. While digital technologies have transformed our societies by improving access to education, economic opportunities, and public participation, they have also created new spaces for violence against women and girls. Today, abuse no longer occurs only in homes, workplaces, or communities. It increasingly occurs online through cyber stalking, online harassment, non-consensual sharing of intimate images, cyberbullying, sextortion, and the emerging threat of AI-generated deep-fake content. In South Africa, where gender-based violence remains a national crisis, technology has unfortunately become another tool used to intimidate, control, and silence women and girls. Women in public office, journalists, activists, and young women are particularly vulnerable to coordinated online attacks that undermine their participation in public life and democratic processes. Recognizing this challenge, South Africa has taken important legislative and policy steps. The Cybercrime Act of 2020 criminalizes malicious digital communications and the unlawful distribution of intimate images. The Domestic Violence Amendment Act of 2022 extends protection to victims experiencing abuse through electronic communications, including cyberstalking and online harassment. In addition, our National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide 2020 to 2030 provides a whole of government framework for preventing and responding to gender-based violence, including violence occurring in digital spaces. Despite this progress, significant challenges remain. Emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence and associated fake news and other forms of cyber criminality are evolving faster than our legal frameworks. Cross-border digital crimes, anonymous online perpetrators, limited digital forensic capacity, and inconsistent content moderation by social media platforms continue to hinder effective enforcement and victim protection. These realities present an important opportunities for us as parliamentarians across the region to strengthen our collective response. We need to prioritize harmonizing regional legal frameworks, strengthening oversight of digital platforms, investing in specialized cybercrime investigation capacity, improving digital literacy and online safety education, and enhancing regional cooperation in investigating and prosecuting cross-border technology-facilitated violence. Technology chairpersons should be a force for empowerment, inclusion, and development, not a weapon that perpetrates violence and inequality. As legislators, we continue to have a responsibility to ensure that our laws, like our model laws, policies, and institutions keep pace with technological advances while safeguarding the dignity, the rights, and security of all. South Africa remains committed to working with our partners in the region to build a safer digital environment and to strengthen regional legal and policy frameworks that leave no women or girl behind. With that, I submit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vice President, for stepping in and sharing South Africa experience. May we invite the Honorable from Mauritius, who has requested to share the experience from Mauritius, to take the floor.
Thank you, Kurasha. Can everyone hear me well?
Very well.
Very well. So, Honorable Guest of Honor, Honorable SG and Speaker, Honorable Chair, Honorable Commissioners, distinguished colleagues, fellow participants and presenters, all protocols observed, thank you for allowing me a few minutes to give a brief on behalf of the Republic of Mauritius. So my name is Honorable Roxana Colette, member of the National Assembly of Mauritius. If I may give a the context and legislative significance for a start. So this month, that is June 2026, the Parliament of Mauritius tabled 2 landmark legislative instruments, namely the Domestic Abuse Bill, number 8 of 2026, which is being debated today, and the Criminal Code Amendment Bill number 10 of 2026, which will be debated at a later stage during the coming months. So together, these bills constitute the most substantial reform of Mauritius gender-based violence legal architecture since the Protection from Domestic Violence Act of 1997. So it's more than 3 decades now. So my brief will analyze the congruence of these bills with the SADC Model Law on Gender-Based Violence adopted by the SADC Parliamentary Forum as the regional benchmark for efficacious rights-based GBV legislation across all 16 member states. So together, these 2 bills that I've mentioned represent the most significant reform of the country's legal framework on gender-based violence. The bills are strongly aligned with the SADC Model Law on Gender-Based Violence, particularly inspired from Articles 6, 27, 29, 34, 36, 37, 39, 40, 43, 46, 52, 66, 69, and 77 of the SADC Model Law on Gender-Based Violence. The bills provide a comprehensive definition of domestic abuse, covering physical, sexual, psychological, emotional, economic, coercive, and digital forms of violence. So our laws recognize economic abuse as a recognized form of GBV. The bill provides a detailed statutory definition of economic abuse that closely reflects the SADC Model Law's recognition of economic violence as a distinct form of gender-based violence, 14 specific subcategories, including coercive control of finances, digital financial platforms, sabotage of employment, and forced assumption of debt. We do as well recognize digital or virtual forms of abuse. Sorry. So at our section 2F of the Domestic Abuse Bill, we explicitly extend the definition of act of domestic violence to conduct perpetrated virtually through digital or electronic means, including telecommunication services, demonstrating Mauritius' recognition of cyber-facilitated domestic abuse as an emerging form of gender-based violence consistent with the SADC Model Law gravity. So importantly, the bills criminalize marital rape, recognize economic abuse in detail, and introduce stronger sentencing for repeat offenders and aggravated crimes such as murder and rape. So the Domestic Abuse Bill also establishes mandatory rehabilitation programs for perpetrators, monitored by the courts and institutions. It ensures victims access to justice through faster proceedings, safe waiting areas, and in-camera hearings to protect privacy. Multi-agency coordination is built into the law with a national panel and local committees for case management. So professionals such as doctors, social workers, probation officers now have a legal duty to report abuse in all its form, and strict confidentiality rules safeguard victim information. The law also acknowledges modern forms of abuse carried out through digital platforms. We have an ongoing national AI strategy and measures to bridge the digital divide. However, we do acknowledge that there are still areas that need attention. While the bills demonstrate strong congruence with the SADC model law, the following areas merit attention in implementation or future legislative review. So we have sexual and reproductive health rights in Articles 19 and 51 of the model law, but neither bill expressly addresses access to emergency contraception, post-rape medical care, or safe abortion services for survivors. And the existing health legislation should be reviewed to ensure these rights are operationally available without police precondition. So the bills do not as well explicitly address specific protections for refugees or stateless persons, and a dedicated anti-GBV fund has not been established yet, and further guidance is needed to ensure that prosecutions continue even if victims withdraw complaints. We further need to mandate digital safety education and to establish a multi-party working group to review GBV and cybercrime legislative gaps. So in conclusion, these reforms place the Republic of Mauritius amongst the progressive jurisdictions in the SADC region. These reforms do demonstrate a strong commitment to protecting victims, holding perpetrators accountable, and aligning national law with regional and international standards. And with this, I so submit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Colette. And I think you set the stage for the next presentation, which is speaking to the provisions of the model law that are linked to Turk-facilitated gender-based violence. But before we do that, I see a request from Madagascar to make a brief submission. Madagascar, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup de m'avoir donné la parole, honorable président, honorables membres, chers tous. Je profite du protocole qui a été déjà annoncé tout à l'heure. Bonjour. Donc, j'interviens pour parler un peu du cas de Madagascar face à la violence basée sur le genre facilitée par la technologie. À ce jour, Madagascar ne dispose pas encore d'une définition juridique spécifique sur la TFGBV, mais toutefois, plusieurs textes juridiques nationaux permettent déjà de protéger les victimes et de sanctionner certaines formes de violence commises au moyen des technologies de l'information et de la communication. Parmi les principaux textes, nous avons la loi relative à la lutte contre les VBG qui définit le VBG et réprime notamment le harcèlement, les violences psychologiques, les menaces, les intimidations ainsi que les outrages sexistes. Nous avons également les dispositions du Code pénal malagasy relatives aux menaces, la diffamation, l'atteinte à la vie privée et violences psychologiques. Et également, nous avons des dispositions relatives aux communications électroniques et à la cybercriminalité. Et dernièrement, Madagascar a adopté la loi sur la traite des êtres humains qui parle de toute exploitation des jeunes filles et des femmes en ligne. Toutes dispositions sur les abus en ligne, en fait, sont inscrites dans cette nouvelle loi. Donc, la loi sur la VBG reconnaît une importance particulière sur les violences psychologiques ainsi que les harcèlements comme des infractions qui sont punies sévèrement par la loi. Et on a quand même des lacunes qui demeurent l'absence d'une définition explicite de la TFGBV ainsi que l'absence des dispositions spécifiques concernant le cyberharcèlement fondé sur le genre et également les violences numériques qui visent les femmes en politique. Nous n'avons pas encore de dispositions spécifiques par rapport à ça. Sinon, par rapport à l'état d'avancement de la transposition de la loi type de la SADC, Madagascar a déjà accompli des progrès significatifs à travers l'adoption de la loi en 2019 sur les VBG, mais cette loi, en fait, reprend plusieurs principes de la loi type de la SADC, mais toutefois, le processus d'harmonisation avec les nouvelles dispositions relatives à la TFGBV est encore en cours de réflexion et en cours de plaidoyer au niveau parlementaire. Et enfin, je tiens aussi à préciser en fait que la justice malgache accepte déjà les preuves numériques en justice. Il s'agit par exemple des captures d'écran, des messages électroniques, des SMS et les échanges sur les réseaux sociaux, mais également les contenus issus de toutes les applications de messagerie. Ce qu'il nous reste vraiment comme défi, c'est de disposer d'un protocole spécifique, standardisé concernant la collecte, la conservation et l'admissibilité des preuves numériques dans toutes les affaires de violence basées sur le genre. Donc, voilà ce que je voudrais partager par rapport aux avancées et les priorités que Madagascar entend entamer prochainement. Merci.
Thank you very much, Madagascar, for sharing your experiences. We appreciate the countries that have been able to make their submissions: Botswana, Tanzania, Eswatini, Namibia, South Africa, Mauritius, and Madagascar. And because our intention is to share a region-wide context so that we establish a very solid baseline, we still appeal to those that have not been able to submit to still proceed and make their submissions. The intention is that we will have an information package that must cover all the countries as we give the state of the region. It's clear that there is a lot of work for parliaments. We are chasing a moving target, even for countries that have promulgated laws. We still see that the emerging dimensions means that there are still gaps that need to be addressed. And therefore, it is important that we share these experiences. At this juncture, allow me to invite my colleague, Clem Sonda, the program manager for the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus and Regional Parliamentary Model Laws Oversight Committee, to give a brief presentation on the model law on GBV and take facilitated gender-based violence provisions therein. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you very much. Good morning, honorable members, and thank you for joining us. May I ride on the protocols already established? I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you and see you. We just request that you adjust your camera because you are cut in half. We are seeing the top half of you. Yes, that's better. You may proceed.
Okay, I'm actually hoping I can be given permission to present without the camera because of the poor bandwidth. It may cause us to lose connection.
Please go ahead.
If that's possible. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Again, good morning, honorable members, and I will after recognizing our guest of honor and the chairpersons of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus, the Regional Parliamentary Model Laws Oversight Committee, the Speaker of the SADC Youth Parliament, and the Commissioner, the AU Commissioner, I will rest on the protocols already established, and I'll quickly try to share my screen so that members can follow. I will try to keep this brief, very brief, so that because it's just highlighting a bit of the background of the model law, and then some of the key provisions, especially particularly those relating to hinging on technology facilitated gender-based violence. So that's my name there, Claire Musonda. And immediately I will just go into the purpose because we don't have much time. And the purpose of the model law is to provide guidance on scope and content of provisions to be in the national GBV laws by the member states. And also to encourage national legislatures to enact laws where these do not exist, or where they do exist but do not conform to the gold standard, which is this model law, to review them and ensure that they conform. It's also to support national laws during implementation stage, especially where gaps still exist. It's also intended to be a yardstick for policy analysts, legislators, implementers in relation to best practices in enacting and dealing with GBV, and to reinforce a common regional approach in dealing with GBV laws, measures, and strategies to help eliminate GBV. It is also intended to be a stimulus for debate, awareness, and advocacy. So I'll immediately jump into the definition of GBV because that is where the critical issue is in terms of incorporating technology facilitated GBV, or popularly known online violence, if you like. So there are many definitions, and the SADC definition is consistent with many international definitions, including the one by the UN. The SADC definition is similar to the UN one, which is all acts perpetuated against women, boys, men, and girls on the basis of their sex, which causes or could cause them physical, sexual, psychological, emotional, economic harm, including the threat to take such acts or to undertake the imposition of arbitrary restrictions on or deprivation of fundamental freedoms in private or public life in peacetime and during situations of armed or other forms of conflict. So looking at that definitions, honorable members and distinguished delegates, you will agree that it's quite comprehensive. It's very broad. It covers everything from everywhere. Then the model law has adopted a definition also, which is very, very broad, and it defines the GBV as broadly to include. And please note the word include, because that means that it's not even closed. As wide as it is, as broad as it is, it's still inclusive of others which are not mentioned here. So it includes physical, psychological, and economic harm. Section 6.3K clarifies that GBV may include online gender-based cyber crimes and bullying. This definition enables member states to extend protection to survivors of online harassment, cyber stalking, and also to possible victims, obviously, image-based abuse and coercive control perpetrated through digital platforms. The definition also incorporates and adopts a multi-sectoral and intersectional approach, which recognizes that effective GBV prevention and response require collaboration across justice, information, communication technology, law enforcement, education, and social welfare sectors, among others. So this approach supports comprehensive national strategies that integrate digital safety, survivor empowerment, and institutional accountability. So the model actually recognizes the importance and the fact that a particular sector or arm may not necessarily be able to comprehensively deal with GBV, but a multi-sectoral approach and collaborative approach is actually what is required. Then I'll speak very quickly about rationale and objectives. The rationale is to provide for non-discrimination, for example, based on statelessness, nationality, refugee or asylum seeker status. It also to provide for mechanisms to promote actual access to services and justice for all. It's also to provide for responsive and referral mechanisms and procedural systems to deal with gender-based violence using a human rights-based and victim-centered approach in conformity with the standards and requirements of the SADC member states, international, continental, and regional commitments. Sorry, and I'd like to emphasize that the model law is actually not developed in a vacuum, but rather it is based on international, continental, and regional commitments made by the member states. So it's something that these are issues they've already committed to in other instruments, but we are bringing it into a legislative instrument, which can then act as a gold standard, particularly for parliamentarians in terms of oversight and ensuring accountability of their governments. Other objectives are to promote gender equality in public and private spheres as a cross-cutting issue, to support socio-economic, political, and cultural areas of society and stimulate productive resources and development opportunities. It's also intended to provide a human rights-based approach to GBV, laws that addresses the root causes of GBV and allows for inclusion of marginalized groups, including refugees, asylum seekers, stateless persons, and persons without documentation, and migrants, and ensure that such an approach is actually applied by all respondents. So this is emphasized quite a little bit in the model law, because sometimes we tend to forget that even an undocumented migrant is still a human being and still enjoys the human rights to be free from violation. So that is quite emphasized in there, because these were found to be quite vulnerable to abuse. In the study that preceded the development of the model law. Then the objectives are also to provide a set of concepts, principles, standards, measures, interventions to assist the member states to develop policies and support enactment of efficacious and comprehensive national laws to deal with GBV, and to provide prohibitions with respect to gender-based violence, access to justice, procedural fairness, measures, strategies, and interventions in key areas relating to GBV without usurping the powers of national legislatures or national executives to initiate and enact laws in their areas of competence and jurisdiction. I also want to emphasize here that the model law is not an effort to usurp the national sovereignty of the national legislatures or the executive or the jurisdictions of the member states to make their own laws. It's simply a guide. Like we've agreed on certain commitments internationally, regional level, and at African level. So can we bring this into one document to concretize them in one place where anybody who wants to then amend their law on their own can then go to this place, pick up these things and say, okay, this takes into account everything that we have committed to at the other global, continental, and regional levels, and we can now put it into our domestic legislation. So it's a very, very easy way for member states to find the information that they need in one place. So it also provides for legal rights, secures protections and legal recourse for victims. It introduces innovative methods to deal effectively with GBV, and it ensures adequate information and financial resources. It seeks actually to ensure that adequate information and financial resources are provided for intervention, for prevention, protection, enforcement, regulation, and measures that are working, maintained, and sustainable. Some of the requirements or the provisions of the model law call for quite an investment of resources. So the idea is that these resources need to be provided and budgeted for, and that is the reason why there's no country that is actually compelled to immediately domesticate, but countries can gradually domesticate while they budget for some of these requirements in line with their national agenda. But of course, it's a call to prioritize these issues so that they are also included in a timely fashion. I think I've talked about human rights, but I just wanted to raise the fact that most SADC constitutions are inspired by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So we do have rights embedded in our constitutions, in our respective member states, and the model law draws from the international human rights that are embedded already in our constitutions. So again, it does not introduce any new rights. These are things that are already agreed upon, and member states have committed to ensuring that those rights are actually enjoyed by their citizens. I will not go into the specific international treaties that our member states have signed up to, but there's a list there, and I will share the presentation. Members can have a look at the whole list. It's a whole list of instruments that are actually cross-referenced in the model law. We have some more there. And once again, just to emphasize that the domestication of the model law ensures that major provisions in regional and international instruments are incorporated, and these may affect gender equality, gender equity, and ending violence against women or gender-based violence, like we say. And then in the same vein, various rights are restated in the model law, and member states are free to include more rights as is appropriate within their legal system or their jurisdiction. Then in terms of focus, the model law provisions should be read broadly to apply to all forms and components of GBV to the extent of the UN definition. If you recall, I did talk about the UN SADC definition and then the definition in the model law itself. And these provisions apply to all victims and perpetrators of GBV. In general, however, it is recognized that women and girls are more vulnerable to and experience more gender-based violence and are therefore disproportionately affected by GBV. So the model law is quite alive to this fact. And as you read through, it does tend to appear quite apparent as you peruse the model law. Then I want to talk about the flexibility of the model law. So the model law is drafted in such a way that member states can adapt or adopt or adjust the provisions to fit into their appropriate national form, style, and structure, which will be suitable for their jurisdictions, and to ensure that whatever they are adopting or adapting or adjusting is actually sitting well within their constitutional architecture. So that is how the model law is quite flexible to fit and to be panel beaten. It's quite malleable, can be fitted into the space that it requires to fit into. And then we have some key provisions of the GBV model law. There are 10 chapters, but I don't want to talk about these chapters because they're very general. I would like to restrict myself. Maybe members can have a look at them later. But I'd like to restrict myself to the ones that are very specific on TFGBV. So I'll leave out about 10 slides from here and just move to specific provisions, which are very specific on technology facilitated GBV. So the model law explicitly expands the definition of gender-based violence to recognize and criminalize TFGBV and abuse in the digital space. Member states are guided. Like I said, this is a guide, it's a golden standard to amend their domestic legislation to address these evolving threats. In part 1, for example, in the definition section, the model law updates the definition of GBV to explicitly include harm inflicted via electronic, digital, or technological means. So this clearly identifies technology-facilitated GBV as an issue. Then through the definition of electronic communications, the model law establishes clear legal parameters for what constitutes digital media, messaging platforms, and data storage to ensure loopholes are closed. And also section 2 and 3 of the model law define the scope of electronic harm. So using these definitions, you can see that the model law actually covers everything that happens in the in the electronic space. In part 3, the model law explicitly prohibits the following. In section 14, it prohibits cyber harassment. It criminalizes the repetitive use of data, text, or images to intimidate, threaten, or cause emotional stress to a person based on their gender. It also, in section 15, criminalizes cyber stalking. It outlaws tracking, monitoring, and following an individual's digital footprint or physical location via technological devices without consent. In section 17, the model law prohibits non-consensual sharing of intimate images and explicitly criminalizes image-based sexual abuse, which includes distributing or threatening to distribute nude or sexually explicit images, videos without consent. In section 19, the model law makes provisions on digital phishing and impersonation. And in doing so, it outlaws creating fake profiles, tracking data, or hacking devices to compromise a person's security or damage their reputation. Then in part 2, under offenses and criminal liability, and part 3, which deals with prevention and protection measures, the model law urges SADC countries to establish legal frameworks that hold technology companies and online platforms accountable for removing harmful content and ensuring safety. So I've already talked about the reference there. It also makes provides for preventative duties and intermediaries, and this deals with the structural directives requiring states to regulate technology companies, establish take-down mechanisms, and enforce intermediary liability, which is categorized under the state responsibility and prevention frameworks. And again, this is in part 3. Honorable members, as legislators, you can hold once these are domesticated, you can hold the governments to account based on them not compelling maybe tech companies or companies which run these platforms to take down harmful content. Yeah. Then other specific provisions deal with survivor protection, and the model law extends standard GBV protective measures such as restraint orders and emergency barring orders to cover digital spaces and online interactions. And again, this is in part 3. These provisions are designed to shift the burden of protection onto state systems, covering everything from immediate physical safety to long-term digital security. It also deals with privacy and non-victimization. Non-victimization is like secondary victimization. It mandates that enforcement and judicial personnel must be trained to handle complaints in a gender-sensitive manner, ensuring the protection of confidential data and preventing secondary victimization during investigation. And with that, I hope I'm within my time. I just want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Claire. Just on time. At this point, let's proceed and receive the presentation on survivor-centered approaches to inspire legal reform, experiences from India and Kenya. For this, we invite colleague Basha from Equality Now. I would plead that let's be sensitive to time so that we make up for lost time. Basha, over to you.
Thank you so much. Distinguished policymakers, legal practitioners, and right advocates, thank you for the opportunity to address this gathering today. This report, what I'm going to talk about, is 2025 report, which Equality Now published. These were 2 landmark reports documenting the live experiences of survivors facing digital violence in India and Kenya. Today, I'm going to share some of the key insights from the studies to showcase how the patterns and experiences of violence are similar among survivors, even when the continents are different. Next slide. So I have already given like the context of the study. So one of the methodology, what we took, the next slide, is we on purpose took like a qualitative approach rather than like a survey or statistical modeling. We wanted to go deeper, understand what has been the survivor's experience, how the survivor voices can be kept at the center, and understand that how what has been their experience dealing with accessing justice and accessing legal support in both India and Kenya. And we for this we went in collaboration with like local partners so that we can actually get to people with intersectional identities, and we can reach out to the most marginalized voices to understand their experience specifically. For this, we have done several interviews and also key informant interviews. So that's the methodology. The next slide. What we have seen is like there are very interestingly the similarity in the survivor's account. When we looked at the forms of abuses, it's almost identical. It is cyberbullying, doxing, sharing of intimate imageries, and it kind of intersect with the lived reality, lived offline realities, and how through digital media these violence were further escalated. Very interestingly, again, digital violence is not something which is only limited to online. How we have seen like intimate partner violence actually escalates online, and then often online violence goes offline. In both the cases, we have seen how stigma, shame, and social isolation were followed after the incident. And then one of the key challenges what we faced while speaking to survivor is actually getting to speak to survivors, because survivors were not very keen talking to us because they had no trust on the system. They had no trust on the society in terms of support, because the amount of stigma on the social harassment they have received after the crime happened to them. We have also seen the first point of contact, which is police, was often not a good experience, turned out to be. And in most of the cases, the survivors given up after their conversation with the police, because often these cases were extremely trivialized by the police and like other parts of the justice system. And when we asked them what is their idea of justice, it very clearly came out that it is not punishment what they imagine to be as justice, but more of restoration. Next slide. So some of the legal challenges what the survivors shared was the institutional failures to help them, to provide them a preventive structure, and that's what they emphasize, that lack of institutional support can make it very difficult for them to actually fight these cases. It's evident that the digital literacy rate among the law enforcement officers were pretty low, and they often turn out to be more dismissive, or the financial frauds or financial cybercrimes were given more importance than gender-based crimes, which happens digitally, like a digital harm. It's again like very common that the policies on paper and the policies on practice are hugely different, and there's a huge gap in both the country context. Platforms remain quite absent and quite non-responsive in most of the cases, where the reports were not taken down, or the reports were not taken seriously. There was a gap between the justice system and the platform accountability, holding platform accountable. Then we have noticed also that digital evidences were not handled properly, and that kind of exposed a severe weakness in the system to handle these witnesses or these evidences. Both the cases, both the survivors actually reported to have experienced secondary trauma while accessing justice. The next slide. So couple of like key recommendation which this report talks about is importance of strengthening survivor-centered law, listening to the survivors, understanding their experiences with their cultural context, mandate platform accountability. That's kind of a non-negotiable at this point of time, which also kind of pushes for preventive approach and also pushes for design which is by safety by design and not safety, the design by growth by design. It is important to look at that, how do we embed trauma-informed approaches across institution, and we center restorative justice, which is more restorative and preventive and not only punitive, because we have seen a reactive action kind of goes to a little extent but doesn't solve the problem in totality. Invest in digital literacy, invest in public education, and also resource allocation is very, very important to build like a robust system, robust law, and also to implement the policies, because we have again spoke about like how things are on paper but things faces challenge while implementing, and amplify survivor voices in policymaking. Policymakers should actually invest time to listen to the survivors, listen to their experiences and the challenges, and actually with right intent to address those challenges. The last slide is actually what we have seen is that it's a global crisis. Even if it has local context, we have seen there are certain patterns are same, they are common, and the institutional failures are also common. So it requires a shared reform agenda. Thank you very much. I would share this entire PPT with all of you for detail. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Basha, for sharing. I know you had prepared even a longer paper. We will be sharing with the honorable members as part of the information pack. But it was very insightful to get an appreciation of the similarities in context and opportunities for strengthening survivor-centered legal protections and services to ground the regional agenda as it unfolds around acceleration of domesticating the SADC model law on GBV to address the evolving dynamics around TFGBV. Thank you, Basha. Honorable members, we have been talking ever since we started from SG's remarks. There have been references that have been made to the policy brief that was jointly developed with SADC PF and Equality Now. Allow me now to invite Honorable Mwanahamisi Mukunda, who is from the Republic of Tanzania. And what brings her here is she is the standing committee chair responsible for us as members in the region to be domesticating, implementing, and ensuring that there is progress to the commitments that were collectively made by the region through the SADC model laws. So she leads the SADC model law oversight committee. Over to you, Honorable Mwanahamisi Mukunda, to deliver and launch the policy brief.
Thank you so much. Sally, I think you are getting me. I'm audible?
Yeah, audible. We just have an echo, so we are not sure if it's two gadgets trying to compete for your attention.
Okay, let me... Now you're hearing me?
We can hear you. We still have an echo from my end. I don't know with others. Over to you, Honorable.
Thank you so much. Let me take this to give my to Speaker Advocate General.
The connectivity is being unkind. Ronald, kindly support us so that we can manage how best we can navigate the echo from Honorable's end.
Thank you, Sally. If there's staff supporting the honorable member from Bunge, please assist. Most likely it's because there are two gadgets that are on in terms of the speakers in the room, so that the echo is taken off.
And that is indeed the case, SK.
Mr. Pressure, now you're hearing me well?
Loud and
Very
clear.
well, Chair. You may proceed.
Okay, thank you so much, honorable members. Our honorable speaker, Advocate Jacobo Mudende, our honorable deputy speaker, Madam Helen from Botswana, our honorable Linda, the chairperson of the Women Caucus, SADC PF, and all other honorable members, all protocol observed. I would like to take this opportunity, honorable members, honorable speaker, to congratulate and register my sincere appreciation for the inspiring opening remark made by the honorable speaker from Zimbabwe. Also, I would like to congratulate all honorable members who shared the experience and effort or milestone from their respective countries. And I would like also to appreciate our different speakers from SIOF and all other participants who actually made a milestone presentation on a GBV sensitivity. Honorable members, distinguished participants, the expansion of technology, as we have discussed this since early in the morning, the contemporary times presents a powerful platform for representation, advocacy, and commerce. However, this digital expansion has been accompanied by an alarming rise in online abuse. If anything, technology facilitated gender-based violence is rapidly reshaping how harm is experienced, penetrated, and perpetuated across the SADC region. Unfortunately, technology is often weaponized to strengthen progress toward gender equality. Technology facilitated gender-based violence through defects, coordinated harassment, and gendered disinformation, often direct targets women in public life. As has earlier been asserted, this is a direct assault on domestic participation in human rights because the silencing leaders, online abuse, weaken representative institutions, and therefore, as the digital technologies become more embedded in everyday life, legal and police responses must evolve to ensure that the weaker member of society, especially women and girls, are protected both online and offline. Hello?
Yes, Chair, we can hear you.
Okay, Mr. Crusher, was just want to hear if the SADC model laws and gender-based violence provides a coordinated regional approach in advancing rights-based, the survival center responses to TFGB, and it can therefore position SADC as a leader in the fight against gender-based violence. It is a comprehensive legislative blueprint, providing a foundation from which some SADC member states have made important progress in strengthening their domestic gender-based violence and cybercrime laws. As highlighted in the policy brief, which is the subject of this webinar. However, the gaps remain where legal framework do not fully capture the realities of digital abuse, exploitation, and coercion or modernized survival protection and perpetrator accountability. Honourable members, distinguished guests, I must hasten the acknowledgement the commendable work done by various member states toward domestication of these model laws. However, progress is still varied across the region. In terms of progress recorded, I am happily note that several member states are utilizing the model law to overhaul outdated penal codes. For example, Zimbabwe integrated key regional guidelines by passing the Marriage Act, which set the minimum age of marriage at 18 years, alongside specialized codes to handle GBV with sensitivity. I can also mention South Africa's Cyber Crimes Act or Zambia's anti-GBV framework. And also in Tanzania, we have made a milestone to achieve in reducing gender-based violence, marked by a measurable decline of reported cases of sexual violence and sharp drop in physical and emotional abuse through the implementation of the National Plan of Action to End Violence Against Women and Children, and also the Cyber Crimes Act, as well as South Africa has done. Additionally, in an effort addresses announced violence, a number of domestic legal frameworks which previously focused primarily on physical assault are increasingly criminalizing psychological, emotional, and economic abuse in alignment with the model law. I further wish to emphasize that complete domestication can be a slow process, we all know. Given that, firstly, a SADC nation operates under diversity legal system, some constitutional provisions, such as those respecting dual legal system as a customary and statutory laws, create a friction over issues like inheritance, marriage age, and customary practices. Secondly, the model law advocates for extensive preventive and protective measures, including specialized police units, healthcare support, and victim-safe houses. But many SADC countries lack the national budgets and institutional capacity to sustain these, especially across rural and remote areas. Thirdly, there are enforcement gaps and several national struggles with implementation due to inadequate training for law enforcement, judicial backlogs, and entrenchment in social cultural norms that normalize or excuses various forms of GBV. In other words, simply enacting laws is not enough. Honorable members, enforcement is the next necessary step to take, and it is just as important. We parliamentarians have a legal role to play in ensuring that digital landscapes are built on respect, equality, and safety for all users. We have a unique and urgent duty to act by advocating for the modernization of outdated law codes, which often leave survivors without recourse and allow perpetrators to operate with impunity. Our goal is to broaden the tighten laws that hold digital platforms accountable, protect victim privacy, and criminalize digital abuse. We must ensure that our legal framework evolve as fast as the technology itself. Safety in digital age must be guaranteed right and not a privilege. Honourable members, by strengthening legislation alone is not sufficient. And today, we are taking a step past discussion to focus on policy solutions, survival-centered justice system, specialized institutional capacity, a clear platform accountability mechanism, and regional cooperation on digital evidence, as well as cross-border enforcement, are all critical to closing the gap between law and lived reality. With the development of this policy brief, SADC member states have an opportunity to build a more coherent and future-ready response to gender-based violence in digital age. Doing so will help ensure that legal protections keep pace with technology change and that survivors are able to access effective remedies, protection, and support. Let me take this opportunity, honorable members, distinguished guests, to call upon my fellow parliamentarians to take a particular interest in the model law, the policy brief, and all relevant instruments that aim at supporting our advocates' work as we push towards domestication and implementation of the SADC model law on GBV. TFGBV is not only impediment to democracy, as we have heard today, it is perceived a violence of human rights, and we all need to put our hands to the wheel to defeat this discourage. With these few reflections, honorable members, it is my profound honor and a privilege to declare the policy brief on technology-facilitated gender-based violence is officially launched, and I thank you all parliamentary member states for your contribution and your remarks. Thank you so much. I submit.
Thank you so much, Honorable, for the inspiration and breathing life to the text of the policy brief. We really appreciate your leadership and the committee, and we are excited and looking forward. Thank you, Honorable. Thank you, everyone. I'm sure we are all curious.
Thank you so much, Sally. Thank you so much, Sally, for the good webinar as we started this morning. And I appreciate all the member states and their presentations and the experience we shared today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Asante Sana. Thank you so much. Now I'm sure we are curious on what is it that is in the policy brief. I do invite Ronald and Spiwe to arrange so that through the chat box we can get the link to all the languages for the policy brief, but also to invite a colleague, Dalito, so that she can take us through just the snippet, the bites of what exactly is in the policy brief. Over to you, Dalito Koroma.
Thank you so much, Sally. Good afternoon, honourable members of Parliament and distinguished guests and colleagues. It's a privilege to join you today on behalf of Equality Now to discuss the key highlights from the policy brief that we've just launched today on technology-facilitated gender-based violence and policy recommendations for accelerating domestication and implementation of the SADC model law. The first findings within the policy brief are quite encouraging. As we've discussed today, the SADC model law is influencing legal reform across the region, and countries including Zimbabwe, Mauritius, and Mozambique have introduced legislation for policy reforms that recognize TFGBV and strengthen cybercrime and data protection frameworks. This demonstrates that not only are we recognizing TFGBV, but there's growing political recognition that violence against women and girls has evolved beyond physical spaces and our legal systems must evolve with it. However, some of the highlights from the policy brief is that there's three major challenges that we have found. So the first challenge being that legal protections remain uneven. So, for example, the definition of TFGBV differs across countries, meaning survivors receive different levels of protection depending on where they live. Many existing laws still do not explicitly address image-based sexual abuse, online grooming, sexual extortion, or the use of digital technologies to facilitate trafficking. And secondly, our legal frameworks are struggling to keep pace with technological change. Emerging threats such as AI-generated intimate images, deepfakes, and digital impersonification are largely absent from current legislation, despite their growing prevalence. And the last major challenge that we have seen within the policy brief is just that implementation remains the region's greatest challenge. Even where strong legislation exists, institutions often lack the technical capacity, resources, specialized training, and cross-border cooperation needed to effectively investigate cases and support survivors. So the overall message from the brief is therefore clear. Southern Africa has built a strong foundation, but SADC policymakers have a significant role to play in ensuring that as a region, we're not only creating the legislation, but we're able to implement and create change. So some of the recommendations that are laid out within the policy brief are that from a regional level, we have an opportunity to strengthen and harmonize across member states. So this includes developing a model amendment protocol to the SADC model law that addresses TFGBV. That also includes emerging risks associated with artificial intelligence. A regional TFGBV observatory could also improve data collection, monitor trends, and support evidence-based policymaking. There's also a need for practical regional cooperation through mutual assistance mechanisms for digital evidence and sharing online content takedowns, which can also be supported with annual parliamentary engagement on TFGBV and digital trafficking. Next slide, please. On a national level, we have an opportunity for the passage and updating of cybercrime, GBV, and data protection legislation to be fast-tracked. There's also room for amending trafficking and GBV laws to explicitly address ICT-enabled offences in relation to TFGBV. The introduction of electronic protection orders within 48 hours would also support the need that survivors have, and also the development of training curricula for prosecutors and judges on TFGBV case management is needed. Next slide, please. In relation to regulators and law enforcement, we have the opportunity as well for trusted flagger arrangements with social media platforms, and also for designated 24/7 cybercrime focal points to support survivors. In addition to this, it would also be beneficial and recommended that annual reports on TFGBV enforcement and takedown actions are published. And finally, in relation to civil society and service providers, the policy brief recommends that we need an expansion of shelter mandates to include digital safety and online takedown support, as well as providing legal and psychosocial services adapted to online harms. Alongside this, it's also important that public awareness campaigns on sexual coercion, extortion, grooming, and safe digital practices are also included as they are essential to prevention. So the findings presented in the policy brief should leave us with both urgency and optimism. So urgency because TFGBV continues to evolve rapidly and often faster than institutions and legal systems. And then secondly, optimism because Southern Africa already possesses many of the foundations needed for progress. We have a strong model law, growing political commitment as we've seen today, and emerging good practices and increasing regional cooperation. So the opportunity before us following the launch of this brief is not simply to domesticate a model law, but also ensure that women and girls across Southern Africa can participate in digital spaces free from violence, intimidation, exploitation, and discrimination. Thank you for your attention, and over back to you, Sally.
Thank you so much, Dalitso. We really appreciate you. Now we gear up so that we catch up with the time. Allow me to also now call Dr. Vivian Joseph from the Southern Africa Youth Forum so that she can share highlights on some of the recommendations that have that the SADC heads of state members have been engaged from the SIOF and the SADC Youth Parliament, and so that we continue to also see some of the already existing work. Over to you, Dr. Vivian.
Thank you very much, Madam Sally, Honorable Chairperson, established protocol observed. I am more than honored and to address this distinguished gathering here today. It is such an honor to meet you all. Well, I will be brief, but I believe my presentation will be able to keep us committed into this discussion for a digitally inclusive Southern Africa. And as we look forward to to hear these recommendations for considerations by our SADC heads of state and relevant policy-making bodies, and this platform is one of them, honorable members. First of all, we urge members of state to accelerate legal policy and budget reforms that close the youth digital divide by ensuring that universal, affordable, accessible, and disability-inclusive internet connectivity, particularly in rural communities, because these reforms should be complemented by education systems that integrate digital literacy from an early age while promoting gender equality across all learning institutions. Secondly, we urge our dear governments to strengthen legal and regulatory frameworks that protect the digital rights of women, girls, and marginalized groups. This includes preventing technology-facilitated gender-based violence, cyberbullying, misinformation, and online exploitation, which is guided by the African Union 2024 Child Online Safety and Empowerment Policy. These efforts should be supported by effective youth response and gender-responsive oversight mechanisms. Third, we call on members of states to uphold fundamental human rights in the digital space by safeguarding freedom of expression, privacy, peaceful assembly, and meaningful participation, and which we thank you, honorable members, for giving us young people the opportunity to address before you. And at the very same time, governments should establish a stronger safeguards against harmful surveillance technologies and high-risk artificial intelligence systems that perpetuate discrimination and inequality. Last but not least, SADC region should invest in the leadership and participation of young women in digital governance, innovation, entrepreneurship, and decision-making. Digital transformation must not only increase access to technology, but also create equitable opportunities for women and girls to lead and shape the region's digital future. And for this, we thank you, SADC Parliamentary Forum, for giving us the opportunity as Southern African Youth Forum to be able to capacitate members of parliament in digital literacy and strengthening their digital capacity. Finally, we encourage the adoption of a human rights-based and equality by design approach to digital development. This should be included in robust data protection and consent frameworks responsible for digital governance by both states and private actors. The digital green strategies that minimize environmental impact of emerging technologies while advancing sustainable and inclusive digital economies. Together, I believe that these actions will ensure that Southern Africa's digital information and transformation is inclusive, safe, rights-based, and it leaves no one behind. I submit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vivian, for the submission representing young people. We move to the penultimate section where we are going to invite the gender consultant, Shosheko Shabalala, to do two things: to speak to the commitment on the pledge, and also the issue of the questionnaire, to allow for follow-up so that we complete the region-wide context. At this juncture, I wish to hand over to you, Shabalala, and in so doing, still appeal that let's be mindful of time so that we make up for lost time. Over to you, Shabalala.
Thank you so much, Kurasha. But I wanted to ask through you, Chair, that I just wanted to do this 5-second appreciation of the video so that people can appreciate that they are not talking to a ghost, but then I will switch off my video because I don't have strong internet.
That's
Is
fine.
that okay?
That's fine. We can
Okay.
confirm that you are alive.
Okay. So I stand on the protocol, obviously, that has already been established. And my task is quite simple, to not only discuss the possibility of action, but to finalize the mechanics of it. We are here, all of us, because we recognize a fundamental truth that technology facilitated gender-based violence is not a future digital risk. It is a present day harm that is actively eroding the democratic participation of women and girls across our region. So in this mission, I want to also acknowledge the exceptional intentional work already achieved by the SADC Parliamentary Forum, particularly in the drafting of the SADC model law on GBV, of which we are fortunate to have as our blueprint. Yet our collective mission today is to move past the phase of regional theorizing and enter the phase of national implementation. So my role is to ensure that the standards that we have discussed today are not just aspirations, but they are anchored into the national legislative fabric of every member parliament. So to achieve this, we have developed, which is already on your screen, a commitment declaration on ending technology facilitated gender-based violence. I will not go through it point by point, but I will say this declaration is uniquely anchored on a personal and national pledge to end technology facilitated gender-based violence, placing individual responsibility and sovereign commitment at the heart of our legislative agenda. This commitment acts as our strategic roadmap for the 2026-2030 legislative cycle, and it rests on three non-negotiable pillars of reform, which are the legislative precision. We must transition, as many speakers have already said, outdated definitions of violence to explicit technology inclusive legal language. So your national statutes must clearly define and criminalize the specific modalities of technology facilitated gender-based violence to ensure that they are actionable in a court of law. And secondly, it must address the justice gap. We must standardize the admission of digital evidence. If social media logs and geolocation data and messaging evidence are not admissible in our justice systems, our laws remain fundamentally incomplete. And third, which is institutional stewardship, we are shifting the burden of safety, that parliamentary oversight must now hold digital bearers, which is our technology companies, accountable for the harms perpetrated via their platforms in strict accordance with international human rights standards. So basically, the 2026-2030 roadmap is now in your hands. I am calling on every one of you to act as legislative champions, which means to committing to a rigorous cycle of reform by tabling domesticating motions within your individual member parliaments. And with that, I would also like to which is to project the country feedback questionnaire, which is basically a tool. I was waiting for my screen to align with my words. which is basically a tool that is designed to capture your current, how can I put it, legislative baseline, specifically detailing where you stand in the domestication process, identifying the exact bottlenecks you are facing, and pinpointing precisely where national capacity is needed to accelerate your progress. So we ask that you interact and have interface with this template. It is available in all SADC official languages, which is English, Portuguese, and French, and also available within our chat system, and we will send it after the convening of this meeting. We ask that you submit the feedback and responses latest by the 20th of July. And it is imperative that you do, because your inputs are vital, as they will directly inform the comprehensive outcome report for this convening and ensure that our roadmap reflects the diverse on the ground realities of the entire region. And beyond that, because I'm not going to go through every single question that is on the questionnaire, I think it will be disseminated through our chat system, is already available, and we will send it after this, that institutional cyber resilience is not a secondary concern. Protecting our women in political leadership from targeted disinformation and online harassment is a prerequisite for a stable, inclusive democracy. We are embedding these intersectional metrics, which include the youth and disability perspectives, directly into our legislative workflows to ensure no one is left behind by our digital transformation. So, Chair, in closing, I would say that we have the tools, we have the framework, and we have the duty. And as stated in our declaration, the time for commitment is now, the time for action is now. So I invite all of you to formally endorse this declaration and join me and SADC PF and Equality Now and SIOF and the entire region in making it a binding mandate for our legislative work through 2030. Thank you very much. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Short and sweet, Shosheko, much appreciated. We have the tools, we have the framework, we have the declaration, we move towards action. It couldn't have been said any better as we move towards the conclusion of our webinar. As they say, all good things must come to an end, and ours is no exception. At this juncture, I invite the Ms. Tembela Msivi, Regional Board Member for Southern Africa Youth Forum, to deliver a vote of thanks and closing remarks. Thereafter, I will invite co-director of ceremony for any housekeeping issues before we conclude. Over to you, Ms. Msivi. May I get confirmation that Ms. Msivi is in the meeting?
Good afternoon, colleagues.
Good afternoon. Thank you. You may proceed.
Great, thank you. I am Tembela Msibi. I'd like to apologize for not showing my camera. I'm afraid that my internet connection is going to give me a lot more trouble if I show my face. But I am the regional board member for the Southern Africa Youth Forum, and I'd like to begin by riding on the protocol that has already been observed. I would like to pass my greetings to the Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly of the Parliament of Zimbabwe, Honorable Advocate Jacob Francis, and Honorable Chairperson of the Regional Parliamentary Model Laws Oversight Committee, Honorable Mwana Hamisi Mungunda, Honorable Chairperson of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus, Honorable Senator Linda Ngumalo, the SADC PF Secretary General, Her Excellency Buemo Sehoma, the AU Commissioner Janet Salanji, Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women in Africa, honorable members of the Regional Women's Parliamentary Caucus, honorable members of the SADC PF serving on committees, honorable members of Parliamentary Youth Caucuses and SADC National Parliaments, the Speaker of the SADC Youth Parliament, representatives from the SADC Youth Parliament, standing committees, representatives from our partners, the staff of the SADC Parliamentary Forum and the SADC National Parliaments, distinguished participants, good afternoon. On behalf of the Southern Africa Youth Forum, I would like to thank our partners, Equality Now, AUDRI, and the SADC PF. As we come to the end of this webinar, we would like to express our sincere appreciation to all participants, policymakers and parliamentarians, youth leaders, civil society actors, and digital rights advocates who joined to deepen our shared understanding of the technology facilitated gender-based violence challenge that we have in Southern Africa. Today has reaffirmed a clear message. Ending technology-facilitated gender-based violence will require more than awareness. It will require law, policy, and institutional action. So by promoting the domestication and implementation of the SADC model law on GBV, and by using the TF-GBV policy brief as a practical guide, we are taking concrete steps towards strengthening national legal frameworks and improving the systems that protect women and girls and other marginalized groups online and in connected spaces. We also recognize the urgent need to ensure that digital transformation is guided by open, safe, inclusive, and intersectional feminist principles, so that women's equal and meaningful participation is protected and not undermined. As we look ahead, we call on stakeholders to move from discussion to implementation through legislative reforms, accountable institutions, and coordinated advocacy that accelerates progress. Finally, we encourage all member states to take up the commitment to tabling domesticating motions and to ensure that the collective roadmap agenda for 2026 to 2030 is translated into measurable action and results. Thank you once again to our conveners, SADC PF, Equality Now, AUDRI, and SAYOF, and to all our partners. With continued collaboration, strong political will, and sustained youth leadership, we remain confident that technology-facilitated GBV can be effectively addressed and that women and girls can participate in digital life free from violence and harm. I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Msibi, for the succinct remarks, closing remarks. I now invite the co-director of ceremony, if there are any issues from your end.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kurasha. Just to appreciate you and all the colleagues who have been also behind the scenes pushing all this together, but specifically to the honorable members who are here present. History have chosen us today to be part of this process, and the same history will judge us on how whatever we have heard, whatever we have said, whatever we have committed, and how we are going to carry it forward. So for now, I want to leave a gifting that we have processed a lot of information. So there's a lot going on in our head, There's a lot going on in our hearts because we are human beings. There's also a lot that is now in our hands. So as we put together our head, our hearts, and our hands, allow me to also direct you to the chat box because I know the team, Ronald and colleagues, are going to share the links for your personal pledge because this calling is individual at this moment because the personal is political and we are gifted differently and deployed differently with our powers. So the personal pledge is an electronic one. It will be shared and we'll share. And lastly, an announcement to say all the speeches that have been delivered, they are going to be translated in all languages. They are almost there, our translators. They are going to be shared as an info pack post the webinar by end of week latest. Same with all the tools that have been made reference to. And then we look forward to be hearing from members by the 20th as shared by Tlotleho so that we can consolidate the regional study and also share with members. Thank you. I submit over to you.
Thank you very much, Sally. And indeed, honorable members, those that have presented the country context, please go ahead and share with Paulina. Those that haven't, please go ahead and still submit so that that is included in the information pack. I end on the note highlighted by the Mr. Bambe from SIOF. He said if policy lacks implementation, it simply becomes rhetoric. The call is for action. We have, it's important that we have had this webinar, but it is even more important that we continue to urge for action, explore opportunities in our line of work as honorable members to ensure that we use the law, as the honorable speaker said, as a tool for social transformation. This brings us to the end of our successful webinar. We wish to place on record our appreciation to our dignitaries led by the honorable speaker, Madam SG, the commissioner, the honorable members, chairpersons, honorable members, and all our partners. Thank you very much. Let's do this one more time as we continue to work through partnership. Thank you, and we may conclude the meeting, and we request IT to terminate.
Group photo, sorry, we didn't bring our cameras for photo. Over to you.
Thank you, Sally. Who is leading us with a group photo? Let's put
Ronald.
let's put our Ronald. Do you want to take over?
Just a second. Let me just quickly change
sure.
the view.
Sure. So please bear with us.
Kindly switch on your cameras.
We are being requested to switch on our cameras, distinguished participants.
Ms. Sally, I see you're looking up. Can you please look into the camera, please?
Ronald, I'm unable to even see my camera.
It's okay. You are okay. You.
Okay. Thank you.
You are good. You are good.
Are we now okay?
Okay. Can we have some cheese?
Cheese.
Cheese.
I think we are good. As
Thank
awkward
you.
as this is, but thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you very much, Honorable.
Thank you very much. Asante sana. Obrigado. Merci.
Thank
Have
you.
a lovely
Thank you.
day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kurasha.
Asante
Thank you,
sana.
the Secretariat, for the good arrangement of this webinar.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kurasha. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Mbowa.